This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Kid Naruto saved Hinata's mother. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time. Let's start the story.
After leaving the compound, Naruto made a series of hand signals to check if anyone was pursuing him. Ninja art. Chakra sense jutsu, he put his palm to the floor. He could feel the chakras of his mother, father, and Hinata on the roof, and a web of them extended from the area of his palm. He smirked and made more hand gestures because he could feel her disdaining him. He uttered, "Shadow Clone Jutsu," as a cloud of smoke enveloped him. When Hinata leapt down to the clone and started questioning it about his actions, he smirked and took off while his clone counterpart remained in place. Then, when he saw Hinata using the gentle fist in a setting where he was relieved she had done it to a clone, Naruto shuddered and fled to the forest in the hopes of persuading Choji to see reason and end the senseless need for the fight. He heard someone closely following him as he hopped from building to building on his way to the forest. Knowing exactly who it was, he smirked and fled through one of the paths he had used to hide from the villagers when he was younger. To his astonishment, the person pursuing him appeared to understand his course. He grinned and performed another shadow clone jutsu, making sure to use the same amount of chakra in each one to conceal himself. Naruto grinned as he saw Hinata leap over his hiding spot to pursue one of his shadow clones as each of the clones took off in a different direction. After that, Naruto headed for the forest, where he saw Choji waiting for him. "You're late," Choji exclaimed. Naruto apologized, saying, "I had a little girl following me." "Listen Choji, can we talk about this? I mean surely there's something we can." Choji yelled, "No, we'll fight now." Naruto nodded and followed him through the forest until they reached a sizable clearing in the center of the forest after he beckoned for him to do so. As he crossed the clearing, Choji declared, "This will be our battleground." Choji, "Listen, if it's that important to you then." Choji, assuming a fighting stance, yelled, "No, Naruto, we'll fight now." With a sigh, Naruto dropped into his own fighting stance. They both grabbed a kunai from their pouches as soon as they saw the single leaf that had just fallen from a tree branch. They hurled them at one another, and as they made contact, the kunai clanged. They then took off in different directions, and two thunks could be heard, indicating that they must have struck trees. Choji started making hand gestures. He yelled, "Body excitation jutsu, arm," as his arms expanded to the size of an elephant. Naruto leapt into the air and avoided a fist that, had it struck, would have turned him to the ground. Naruto jumped out of the way once more as he snapped a tree like a toothpick, and the fist went through multiple trees before returning like a big rubber band. He gazed at the broken tree with wide eyes. Then a giant foot sprang toward him, and he leapt into the air. He made a series of hand gestures. Choji jumped out of the way as the bear-sized flaming fox opened its flaming mouth to devour him. Demon fox style. Kyuubi Inferno Jutsu, he yelled. He exhaled a deep breath. Naruto ran at Choji and punched him in the face, ending the technique. This sent him flying through a tree and landing at the base of a second. A boulder-sized fist slammed down right where Naruto was standing moments before, and he leapt to the side as Choji vanished in a puff of smoke and turned into a log. Naruto made a single hand gesture, and there was a low snap, like a rubber band bouncing back into place after being stretched out. He exclaimed, "Shadow Clone Jutsu," as a huge cloud of smoke engulfed him, revealing roughly 100 Narutos, all of whom flew in the direction where the limb was retracting. Only to have more than half of them killed by a massive explosion. The authentic Naruto grinned. As he watched the last of his clones be crushed by a big tree, he thought, "Very clever Choji." Naruto performed another series of hand signals before jumping into a tree. There was a lot of banging and crashing, and then Naruto felt someone behind him. "Wind style, vortex jutsu," he yelled as a whirlwind picked up and started to swirl in the direction his clones vanished. A cool piece of metal pressed against his throat, and he grinned. Behind him, Choji said, "Nice try, Naruto, but it looks like I win." Naruto grinned. He raised his arms in defeat and said, "Yep, you win Choji." Choji chuckled. A furious, "Oh no, you're not getting off that easy," was his statement. Choji was about to cut his throat when Naruto jerked his head back and struck him in the face. Then, kicking Choji with his foot back, Naruto sent him hurtling into a tree. When Choji struck the tree, he turned into a rock, and Naruto went into a defensive stance. "I have to finish this now. I can't keep putting it off." He tried to sense where Choji was hiding at the moment. Two men, one with a large sword that appeared to be bandaged, walked through the woods with their black cloaks patterned by red clouds. Two straw hats covered their faces. The one with the sword questioned, Do you think we'll be able to find him? I'm quite certain we will find him. Let's just hope that Lord Jiraiya has informed him of our mission, otherwise we may be in for an unavoidable fight, said the other person. The two were walking quietly through the forest when all of a sudden there were loud banging and crashing noises. A big fox made of flames ran toward them but vanished before it could reach them. The person with the sword began to laugh. Well, nice to see that you're still welcome here, he exclaimed, struggling to contain his laughter. Pointing to the spot where Naruto and Choji were fighting, Kisami's partner said, "Don't be so sure, Kisame, that fireball was not intended for us." Kisame said, "Hey, isn't it Naruto?" Kisami's partner said, "Yes, it is," with a slight smile spreading across his face. As he dodged Choji's meatball tank attack, Naruto leapt into the air. Choji then crashed through the trees, pursuing him like a gigantic pinball. Naruto then made a T sign with his middle and index fingers. Subsequently, a shadow clone materialized at his side, began to accumulate chakra on his right, and as they ran, a spiraling ball of chakra soon formed before the clone vanished. Naruto looked at the ball rolling in his direction. Naruto yelled, "Ransengan!" as he pushed Choji with the spiraling chakra, sending him flying through multiple trees and backwards. Choji was crumpled in a heap at the base of the only tree he had struck that was unharmed when Naruto ran to him. When Naruto heard a rustling sound, he leapt into the air to avoid a shower of kunai and shuriken, and then Choji emerged after the spray. Naruto grinned as he had finally achieved his victory. What the? A faint popping sound was heard as the Choji at the tree's base transformed into a broken log, answering Naruto's question. The taunting words came from Choji. "Impressive, Naruto. You've destroyed a log." Naruto gave him a sly smile. He remarked, "Impressive, Choji." Choji was sliced in the back of the head by another Naruto. As Choji collapsed, unconscious, the clone uttered the words, "But not good enough to win." Naruto heard another rustling sound and smirked as he saw Hinata enter the clearing, or what was left of it, after the clone vanished in a puff of smoke. With a furious expression on her face, Hinata approached him, crossed her arms, and began tapping her foot. Hinata questioned, "Well, are you going to explain what this is all about?" A Cheshire Cat grin appeared on Naruto's lips as he rubbed the back of his head. Well, hey, you wouldn't believe me if I told you," replied Naruto. Hinata's expression turned into a furious smile. She said, "Try me." Naruto grinned and let out a sigh. He said, "All right, I'll tell you. When you catch me," and fled into the woods, Hinata, or what she believed to be him, following him. Wondering when Hinata would figure it out, Naruto grinned from behind a tree. His heart skipped a beat when he heard some leaves rustling behind him. He thought it was Hinata, and he ducked what looked like a bandaged sword as a wave of murderous intent passed over him. Naruto assumed a combat position. He drew out a kunai and exclaimed, "Who are you?" The person with the sword laughed. "Well, Itachi, I'm assuming he doesn't know," Kisame said, removing his straw hat along with his companion. The one with the sword had dark blue skin and hair, 3 gil, like marks on either side of his neck, and an evil smile on his face with rows of razor-sharp teeth. Itachi's eyes were blood red, with 3 black tomos swirling around a black iris, and his long black hair was pulled back in a ponytail. He appeared to be an older Sasuke. Naruto's eyes narrowed, but his face didn't convey it. He was actually a little scared of the 2 men in front of him because he was familiar with their bingo book profiles, particularly Itachi's. Raising his kunai a little, Naruto gazed at the 2 Junin-level ninjas, his blue eyes fixed on them as if they would twitch even a little. He was aware of the Akatsuki's intentions to seize all of the Biju and Jinchuriki in order to use their power for their own malevolent ends, but for some reason they refrained from attacking him. Itachi stated calmly, as though speaking to an old friend, "We haven't come here to fight you, Naruto." "How do I know you're not trying to trick me?" Naruto asked, tightening his hold on his kunai. While sitting on one of the stumps that Naruto, Choji, and Kisame had just constructed, Kisame remarked, "If we wanted to attack you we'd have done so by now, especially when you were fighting with that Akamichi kid." Keeping his kunai in the air, Naruto grinned. "Jiraiya sent us not to fight you, he said to tell you. A ninja is not defined by how many jutsu he knows or how strong he is, but by his guts and courage to never give up," Itachi replied. With a sigh of relief, Naruto returned his kunai to its holster. Naruto sat on one of the logs and said, "Master Jiraiya told me you were coming, but I had to be sure you were you." Itachi sat down on a log across from Naruto after nodding. Naruto asked, "So what is it that you want to tell me?" "As you know, the Akatsuki is after you for the Kyuubi that you contain, but we've just found out the reason for it," stated Kisame. And that would be? Naruto inquired, his tone tinged with sarcasm. To create a new Jinchuriki, one that will have the powers of all the tailed beasts. As you know, the tailed beasts each have their own special abilities. The one that he prizes most is the Kyuubi's, mainly for its regeneration, and fire, wind manipulation, stated Itachi. Naruto gave him a perplexed look. Why are you telling me this? Why isn't Master Jiraiya telling me this? Replied Naruto. Because Jiraiya is doing something important for the Hokage, stated Itachi. Kita like you? Naruto inquired. Itachi remarked, something like that. But what you're saying is impossible. There is nobody that can contain all of the Biju, replied Naruto. Dangerous, but not impossible, Itachi said. What do you mean? Asked Naruto, looking a little perplexed. Think about it, Naruto. If you gather together all 9 of the Biju, the most powerful creatures known to man, and placed them inside a single container, the result would be Armageddon, said Kisame irritably. Naruto's expression turned completely white. But the Biju, they're sealed away, aren't they? So how can the Akatsuki extract them from their hosts? Replied Naruto. Itachi stated bluntly, as though they were discussing the distinction between white and wheat bread. Once more, it is not impossible, just dangerous. When you extract a Buji from a Jinchuriki, the Jinchuriki dies. So what does Master Jiraiya want me to do about this? Replied Naruto. That is the main reason why he sent us here. I had to report to the Hokage anyway, but he wants you to be sent to the Land of Snow. There you will find a temple that is said to contain manuscripts from an ancient battle, Itachi replied. What's so important about me learning ancient history? Replied Naruto. Because if Yerji's theory is correct, that manuscript tells of a battle that started over the very same thing that the Akatsuki are now trying to do, Itachi replied. Alright, so when I find this manuscript, what do I do with it? Replied Naruto. Jiraiya said that you are to bring it back to the village and keep it somewhere safe until he returns to help you decipher the ancient text, Itachi replied. Naruto questioned, but how am I going to get to the Land of Snow? Itachi grinned. Itachi said, let's just say you won't be going alone, as he and Kisame stood up and put on their straw hats again. As the two vanished in a cloud of smoke, Itachi said, now, Naruto, if you'll pardon us. Naruto shook his head and sighed. Can things get any worse today? As he left the unconscious Choji where he was, he thought as he left the forest. Oh well, he thought, perhaps the Hokage will not permit us to embark on the mission. As he emerged from the forest, he was confronted by a furious-looking Hinata, which made him wish he was running with Jiraiya after being apprehended during one of his research missions. With a hint of fear, Naruto said, hey, hi, Hinata. Her tone was unconvincingly sweet as she said, oh Naruto, I have a little present for you. Naruto started to perspire heavily. Running past her and back towards the Hyuga compound, he exclaimed, I just remembered something, while Hinata followed closely behind. Naruto. Get your butt back here and take it like a man, she yelled. He yelled back, I'm not a man, I'm still a boy, and ran as quickly as he could. Though he was beginning to regret what he had done to Hinata yesterday, Naruto decided it was well worth it because he knew what his first ninja mission would be before even his sensei did. When he woke up the following morning, his body hurt all over. He dressed and went to the kitchen, where he discovered Hinata was still asleep. He ate a quick breakfast because he didn't want to confront her wrath at this early hour of the morning. As he left the house, the Hokage mountain was just beginning to receive some sunlight. In order to meet his team for their first mission, Naruto headed to the training ground. After noticing that no one was around, he lay down against the same tree as before and quickly dozed off, his thoughts consumed by the vision of Isaribi's demise. He writhed and wriggled beneath the tree, causing him to have fitful sleep. He started to break out in a cold sweat, as if something were crushing him. Ino was disappointed to see Naruto lying on the ground, writhing in his sleep, when she soon walked onto the field in the hopes of spending some alone time with Sasuke. When she mentioned that he was perspiring a lot, she got a worried expression on her face. His face appeared to be troubled, and she felt his cool head. Uncertain of what else to do, she concluded that waking him up was the best course of action. She knelt next to him and gave him a gentle prod, but all he did was swat at her hand. She tried again, but to no avail. This young man refers to himself as a ninja. She thought angrily as she attempted to wake him, but it was in vain. She pulled her hand back as a blood-red chakra started to flow around him as she attempted to wake him for the 5th time. The grass he was lying on was scorched, and the air abruptly became hot. The thickening of his whisker, like birthmarks, gave his blonde hair a hint of red. A voice said, Naruto, out of nowhere. All of the changes that had taken place during his sleep vanished in an instant as Naruto shot straight up. His breath came in sharply and quickly, and he wiped the perspiration from his forehead onto his sleeve. Naruto asked, looking confused. What happened? Where's Isaribi? Ino said politely, Naruto, there is no one here named Isaribi. After staring at her in confusion, Naruto suddenly realized something. He looked at the area where he had been sleeping and asked, what happened? A little nauseous, Ino remarked, why? You had this weird chakra surrounding you and your features began to change. Naruto stated gravely, Ino, you must never tell anyone about what you saw. It is very important that it remain secret. In order to avoid upsetting him and learning the truth about that red chakra, Ino nodded. Sasuke questioned Naruto from behind, what must remain secret? When Naruto heard Sasuke's voice, he tensed up. Nothing, was his hasty response. Sasuke gave a grunt. Whatever, he then took a seat away from them, and Ino trailed behind him. Naruto sighed. He wasn't sure he could trust Ino, but he didn't really have an option. He was also concerned that Choji might reveal his secret, but he was confident that Hinata would silence him if he became too loud, at least that's what he hoped. It took a few hours for Kakashi to show up, and when Ino reprimanded him for being late, a small smirk was concealed by his mask. You know Kakashi-sensei, you're not showing us good etiquette by always showing up late, she yelled at him. Naruto rubbed his temples and growled, Ino can it? Ino glared at him a little but remained silent. With a smile on his masked face, Kakashi said, thank you Naruto. Now you guys, I have some good news for you today, you get your first mission. My dad told me about these starter missions, Ino grumbled. She said with a hint of fear, he said that you start out collecting garbage and fixing people's fences and such. Yes, normally that is how genins start off, but the Hokage seems to hold you three as an exception to this rule, said Kakashi. Ino questioned, what do you mean? Kakashi declared, you three are going on a C-ranked mission. Ino squealed with delight, oh wow, I can't wait to tell Sakura when I see her next, she'll be so jealous. Right now why don't you two go and get ready, dress warmly, we're going somewhere very cold. Naruto, I'd like to have a word with you, replied Kakashi. Sasuke gave Naruto a suspicious look but remained silent due to the presence of his current companion. He then left, leaving Ino following him like a lost puppy. What's up sensei? Naruto asked, looking a little perplexed. With seriousness, Kakashi remarked, Naruto, you nearly lost it. Naruto tried to conceal the tears that threatened to spill from his eyes as he said, I know sensei, I can't help it, the dreams just come up. When Kakashi saw that Sasuke had stayed, he said, I understand what you mean, Naruto, but you've got to try or else you know what will come out. Observing Sasuke's chakra as well, Naruto nodded. Now why don't you go and get your things ready? Kakashi said with a smile. Naruto prepared for his mission by running back to his house and gathering his belongings. Naruto watched as the attack touched the nearby ocean, causing it to freeze into a new landmass made entirely of ice, and he leapt into the air to avoid the ice jutsu that had just been thrown at him. A whistling sound caught his attention, and he managed to dodge a kunai with an explosive tag attached. The tag detonated with a loud explosion. Naruto landed on the ground that had started to, unbeknownst to him, melt, creating a huge plume of smoke and fire that appeared in the area, giving both ninjas excellent cover. As Naruto drew his final kunai from his pouch, he worried about his teammates' safety as they each engaged in combat with their own foes. Naruto abruptly leapt from his position as a huge spike composed entirely of ice erupted from the ground, slicing Naruto's forearm with its blood-blazed tip. In an effort to stop the bleeding, Naruto clutched his ripped sleeve. He then had to dodge a kunai that was approaching with a second paper bomb attached. Naruto leapt into the air just as the second bomb detonated, smoke filling his eyes. He tried to see through the hazy air, but all of his senses told him that he was in the worst possible danger, so he thought, this is bad. As he fell through the smoke-filled air, he felt a dull pain at the top of his head, even though he already knew that for a ninja, being in the air is like a lost lamb inside a lion's den. While his teammates were engaged in combat with their own opponents, Kakashi did everything in his power to free himself from his opponent and attempt to rescue his fallen teammate. However, it was all in vain because the person he was fighting blocked him at every turn. The explosions from the two paper bombs caused a sizable crevasse into which Naruto fell. After that, Naruto vanished from view. His opponent blurred through a series of hand signals, and the loud howling wind drowned out the name of his jutsu as the crevasse closed, enclosing Naruto in its frozen depths. 24 hours earlier, as they docked in the tiny village known as the Land of Snow, Naruto shuddered a little and wondered why it was called that when everything there appeared to be the same as Konoha. Naruto looked up at Kakashi, who had only on his typical Jonin uniform, and noticed that even the air was warmer than it had been on the boat. As she took off her bulky parka, Ino questioned, "Kakashi-sensei, why is it so much warmer on the land than it was in the boat?" "Because they use chakra generators that cause the land to warm, giving it a look and feel of late spring, early summer," Kakashi replied. "Chakra generators, that sound fascinating," Ino replied. The only person who didn't appear to be impacted by the strange change in the weather was Sasuke, who glared at anyone who passed him as though they were unimportant little ants that needed to be squashed as soon as he got off the boat. Naruto gave a headshake. Naruto thought, "I'm surprised his hair isn't brown because this boy has his head so far up his anus." Irritated, Sasuke said, "Now mind telling us why we're here?" "We're here because the leader of the Land of Snow, Princess Koyuki, asked us to search for an Ansen manuscript for her," stated Kakashi. Knowing the true reason they were there, Naruto snickered stiffly. As Kakashi guided the group through the busy streets of the Land of Snow, the various sights, sounds, and smells of the locals and merchants attempting to sell their wares overwhelmed their senses. When Naruto noticed a huge ramen stand, it truly made his heart race. He sat down and ordered a bowl, which led Ino to scold him for being late. Hey, it was for a good cause. He cheerfully patted his swollen belly. Ino questioned, "Oh, and what good cause was that?" Naruto gave a small chuckle. After bursting out laughing and saying, "Feed the hungry," they were given a lecture about Naruto's immaturity, for which they had brought earplugs. They arrived at a sizable palace that appeared to have been completely carved out of massive slabs of marble. The roof was sloping and covered in blood-red tiles, and the castle's entrance was guarded by 2 stone dogs. When the ninjas reached the throne room, they respectfully bowed to the woman seated in front of them after making their way through the numerous hallways and corridors. Her face was liquid paper white, her eyes had dark markings above them, her lips were a deep crimson red, and she wore a green kimono. Her dark hair was tied up in an elegant bun that was held up with 2 needles. As he would have a field day attempting to include Master Jiraiya in his research, Naruto found himself picking his jaw up off the ground and complimenting Kami for not having her with them. "Princess Koyuki, we are the Konoha ninjas you sent for," Kakashi said, bowing once more in deference. The princess acknowledged them with a nod, seemingly examining them. "You're the best that Konoha could send. Your group consists of 3 children and an adult. What makes you think that you could possibly be able to retrieve the manuscript?" replied Koyuki. "With all due respect, Your Highness, my group is more than qualified to perform this task," replied Kakashi. The princess grinned. Koyuki grinned and said, "All right, then you won't mind if I give you a little test?" "We'd be happy to," Kakashi said with a smile. After giving a nod, Koyuki snapped her fingers, and 2 men the size of an experienced bodybuilder each entered the room. With a bored tone, Kakashi remarked, "I think you 2 will be more than enough for these 2, Sasuke and Ino." One of them cracked his knuckles and said, "Overconfident, aren't you?" The 4 of them were about to fight when Koyuki held up her hand. Sasuke and Ino sighed as they both took a step forward. With a faint smirk, Koyuki remarked, Not you 2, I want to see the strongest of you fight both of them." Kakashi said in a tone that was almost bored. Well, in that case Naruto, that'd be you, wouldn't it?" Naruto gave him a longing glance. He asked, not really wanting to fight anyone if he could avoid it, "Do I have to?" Kakashi merely nodded, which made Naruto sigh and move forward while Sasuke and an irate Ino took a step back. Koyuki grinned as Naruto moved forward, assuming that he was just a regular genin and couldn't compete with her 2 most formidable guards. Koyuki asked in a phony sweet voice, "Are you sure you want to send him?" Kakashi seemed to be smiling, and his mask curled. "Trust me, Your Highness, Naruto is actually stronger than I am," replied Kakashi. Koyuki gave a shrug. Koyuki snapped her fingers and gave the order for the 2 guards to attack, but neither of them made a move. "It's your decision," she said. Koyuki halted in the middle of her sentence as the 2 guards collapsed, unconscious. "Are you 2 deaf or something?" Neither Koyuki nor Ino had seen Naruto move an inch, and their eyes popped out of their heads. Sasuke asked, a little amused, "Impressive, Naruto. Tell me, how many times did you hit him?" As though he had just used a pencil to write a letter, Naruto replied, "Oh, about 3 times apiece." Sasuke asked in a somewhat callous tone, 3? Where did you get your power? Was all I counted. Sasuke thought angrily. Ino asked, her eyes still not back on her head, What just happened? Very well, you may go and retrieve the manuscript for me, replied Koyuki. After the ninjas bowed respectfully and departed the castle, Kakashi took them to a small inn where they would spend the night before getting an early start on their search for the manuscript in the morning. Ino said, "Hey Kakashi-sensei, how come you didn't have Sasuke fight those two? He could have easily taken them down, and he's a lot better than Naruto." Her voice was venomous as she called out Naruto's name. Naruto, who had dozed off on one of the futons, snored softly and ignored her. Before coming up with his response, Kakashi took a moment to gaze out the window. "Sasuke's skills are great, Ino, but Princess Kayuki wasn't interested in any of us. She wanted to test Naruto's skills," replied Kakashi. Ino said angrily, "I think Princess Kayuki has a few screws loose." Kakashi turned to face the sleeping blonde and remarked, "No, she's actually right to test Naruto." Ino questioned, "What do you mean?" "Naruto has a power inside that he uses only when he absolutely has to, much like when he fights, but as far as I know he's only ever used it twice in his lifetime," stated Kakashi. As though Kakashi's words were mere words, Ino gazed at Naruto with a certain amount of skepticism. There is absolutely no possibility that he is more powerful than Sasuke, she believed. As the group of ninjas headed to the summit of a particularly tall mountain that was supposed to contain the ruins they were looking for, the dawn broke brightly over the snow-covered landscape. Naruto pondered, "I wonder what Ichi found when he read those manuscripts." They soon discovered a huge structure that appeared to be Princess Kayuki's, but it was totally destroyed. The roof and walls were covered in enormous piles of snow and ice. As the wind increased and began to blow on the ancient house, loud growling and creaking sounds were heard as it was about to collapse under the weight of the mountain of snow that was resting on the rotting roof. As Naruto sensed a lot of chakra emanating from the location, which appeared to be coming from 4 strong individuals, his senses began to go into overdrive. "Go back or you will die," a voice without a body said. The words, "We have permission to visit this place," were spoken by Ino strongly. The voice yelled, "Then you will die," but it sounded like multiple voices at once. They were confronted by 4 men, all of whom wore bulky, white garments, had white masks over their faces, and had eyes that seemed to be nothing more than black holes. Each of Kakashi, Naruto, Ino, and Sasuke assumed a defensive position as their skin rotted and decayed and pieces of frostbite shone on their rotten bodies. "Who are you?" Kakashi inquired. One of the ninjas said, "We are the frozen guards. Of this ruin we only allow those who can defeat us to enter here." His voice was a bit higher than a whisper in the wind. With an arrogant tone, Sasuke said, "Then let's get this over with." A sudden gust of wind caused the water in the air around them to turn cold as the 4 guardians each reached down to the snow. The 4 then stood up, each with a different weapon. The one on the far right held an ice quarter staff, which allowed them to freeze into snowflakes. The person closest to him was brandishing an ice-long sword, while the person next to him was holding 2 ice kodachis. A chain quarter staff was held by the person farthest to the left. After drawing a kunai, the 4 ninjas selected a dance partner and started their respective battles. Using the butt of his kunai, Kakashi quickly broke his opponent's quarter staff in half while deftly dodging and parrying his blows. The mask of the guard twisted into a smile. "Impressive," the guardian said in a whispery voice, "I haven't had this sort of a challenge in nearly a century." Astonished that the guardian appeared to be behaving as though this were merely a friendly sparring match, Kakashi remarked, "Well, I'm flattered." The guardian then threw half of his broken quarter staff, which now had a razor-sharp point on the end, and he leapt out of the way. In response, Kakashi hurled a shuriken at the guardian. The guardian said, "Ice, wind style, frozen wave jutsu." Kakashi performed a series of hand signals and leapt away from a huge wave of snow and ice that had seemingly materialized out of thin air. Kakashi exclaimed, "Fire style, fireball jutsu," as he lowered his mask and blasted a huge ball of flames at the approaching ice and snow. A dense cloud of steam and vapor started to fill the air as the 2 jutsus collided, producing a low hissing sound. It sounded like a wheeze to Kakashi's highly trained ears, but the more he listened, the more he understood it to be laughter. When Kakashi reached up to his headband and pulled it up, he saw a blood-red eye with 3 black dots surrounding a black pupil. Something's wrong here, he thought. As he started to make sense of what was starting to happen around him, the exposed eyes started to spin quickly. But because of all the vapor and fog, he was unable to see what was going on around him, no matter what he did. Then, almost out of nowhere, a huge dagger of ice flew at him, and he leapt out of the way. As he searched for the source of the ice, Kakashi saw nothing but a hail of ice daggers hurtling in his direction. In an attempt to escape the fog, Kakashi leapt into the air, but it appeared to have encased him, as though it was independent. No matter how high he went, the fog remained as dense as before. What is this? As he began to avoid another wave of ice, he thought. Kakashi tried to avoid them as much as he could, his eye whirling wildly as it tried to interpret the fog and the jutsu. He tried everything, but it didn't work. The fog was a mystery to him, and then he felt a sensation in his stomach. He noticed that he was pierced by one of the daggers when he looked down. When the two guardians agreed to team up against each other, Ino and Sasuke ended up fighting alongside each other. While Ino did her best to block the loose parts of the staff and keep an eye on Sasuke's back, much to her delight, which was getting harder and harder, Sasuke deflected the sword attacks. Sasuke shoved her aside to prevent the sword from chasing her away and yelled, "Ino, watch out." Ino reddened. He said joyfully, Sasuke, you save me." "Shut up and look out," yelled Sasuke, trying to keep the two guardians at bay. It seemed as though he was seeing things before they happened because as he battled the two, he noticed that their movements became slower and more readable. Then a smirk appeared on his face as he realized something. As he dodged the guardians' blows, he thought, "I'm one step closer to completing my goal." Then he started making hand signals. Sasuke yelled, "Fire style, fireball jutsu," and blasted a huge fireball at the two guardians. As the flames started to lick the two guardians, there was a lot of steam. As the two vanished into the dense fog, which made it difficult to breathe, a low wheezing sound was heard. As they struggled to breathe, the two ninjas started to cough and splutter, and their wheezing sound grew progressively softer. Their lungs found it difficult to take in even the smallest amount of air as their vision became blurry. Every time they breathed, they felt pain. Sasuke tried to perform another set of hand signals but passed out before finishing the jutsu. Naruto broke one of the frozen blades with the butt of his kunai while avoiding the katanas with relative ease. Naruto nodded and put his kunai back on after the guardian tossed his final blade aside. Naruto jumped into the air to dodge the ice jutsu that had just been thrown at him after the guardian performed a series of hand signals. He saw as the attack touched the nearby ocean, causing it to freeze into a new landmass composed entirely of ice. He jumped just in time to avoid a kunai that had an explosive tag attached after hearing a whistling sound in the air. The tag detonated with a loud explosion. Naruto landed on the ground that had started to, unbeknownst to him, melt, creating a huge plume of smoke and fire that appeared in the area, giving both ninjas excellent cover. As he drew his final kunai from his pouch, Naruto's mind focused on his teammates and his concerns for their safety as they battled their individual foes. Naruto abruptly leapt from his position as a huge spike composed entirely of ice erupted from the ground, slicing Naruto's forearm with its blazed tip. In an effort to stop the bleeding, Naruto clutched his ripped sleeve. He then had to dodge an approaching kunai that was carrying a second paper bomb, which exploded as Naruto leapt into the air, smoke filling his eyes. He tried to see through the hazy air, but all of his senses told him that he was in the worst possible danger, so he thought, "This is bad." As he fell through the smoke-filled air, he felt a dull pain at the top of his head, even though he already knew that for a ninja, being in the air is like a lost lamb inside a lion's den. While his teammates were engaged in combat with their own opponents, Kakashi did everything in his power to free himself from his opponent and attempt to rescue his fallen teammate. However, it was all in vain because the person he was fighting blocked him at every turn. The explosions from the two paper bombs caused a sizable crevasse, into which Naruto fell. After that, Naruto vanished from view. His opponent blurred through a series of hand signals, and the loud howling wind drowned out the name of his jutsu. The crevasse then closed, enclosing Naruto in its frozen depths. Kakashi transformed into a skewered log and watched it split in two, letting out a small sigh of relief. When he had finished observing the log split, his eyes ceased to spin. That's it, then, as he made a series of hand signals, he thought. When the fog abruptly cleared from around him, he looked up to see Naruto plummeting into a wide chasm before being sealed up. He shook his head, ran to Ino and Sasuke, and undid the genjutsu they were under because his heart felt like it had fallen into his stomach. Sasuke and Ino both sat up and began to cough violently. In an attempt to understand what had happened, they both inhaled deeply. Ino said, "Kakashi-sensei, you saved us." "Yes," Kakashi said gravely. Ino glanced around. "Curious," she said, "Sensei, where's Naruto?" Kakashi gestured toward the spot where Naruto's grave was now hidden by a thick layer of ice. Curious, Ino glanced at the location he was indicating. "Is he hiding?" she foolishly inquired. Kakashi let out a sigh. Kakashi said gravely, "No, Ino, he's not hiding, that's his grave." Ino's face turned as white as the snow on the floor. "But he was trained by Master Jiraiya," Ino replied. As Kakashi pulled his headband over his Sharingan eye, he remarked, "This enemy was something that not even Master Jiraiya could have faced." As the group descended the mountain, Kakashi said, "Let's go back to the village and we'll reconsider our plan because it appears the Guardians have retreated for the time being." After learning that her squad had been assigned to support Naruto's, Hinata walked through the village beaming. She moved as swiftly and calmly as she could, but her enthusiasm was beginning to match Naruto's when he discovers a new ramen dish. Before long, she was in her room packing everything she believed she would need for the journey, primarily bulky clothing and other items. After leaving the Hyuga estate, she bounded to the location where she would be gathering with the other members of her team. She didn't have to wait long because everyone had already shown up. Shortly after she did, Shoji appeared less than thrilled about helping someone he had thought of as a competitor for Hinata's affection. Shikamaru appeared as uninterested as ever, not particularly wanting to leave but merely groaning and sighing because he had no other option. Kurenai exuded pride as she grinned at her team, pleased that the Hokage had selected them to support Kakashi's group. After giving each other a nod, the group departed to meet the boat that would transport them to the land of snow. The group discovered that the weather was significantly warmer than they had anticipated when they jumped off the boat as soon as it docked. Kurenai inquired about the unusual weather, and they were informed that the area was warmed by chakra generators. They spent a considerable amount of time strolling around the village in search of the inn where Kakashi and his group would spend the night. Earlier that day, Kakashi had sent a mission report. When they eventually located it, Hinata almost jumped with delight and inquired about the room where Kakashi Hitaki was staying. They went to the door and knocked after the receptionist gave them the room number. They knocked again, but got no answer this time. Hinata said, "Maybe they've already left," with a tone of disappointment. They turned when they heard footsteps and saw Sakura, Sasuke, and Kakashi ascending the stairs. Although the group appeared to have just returned from hell and back, one person was missing. Hinata inquired, "Where's Naruto?" assuming he had likely paused for a snack. Team 7 members all fell silent, and the tension in the room abruptly increased to the point where it felt like a thick cloud of smoke. When they didn't respond, Hinata became concerned, but she reasoned that perhaps they hadn't heard her. She raised her voice a bit and asked, "Where's Naruto?" She knew that she had shouted loud enough for the people in the next room to hear her, but once more, no one answered. There was a problem, and she was desperate to find out where Naruto was. She firmly looked Naruto in the eye and said, "Kakashi-sensei, where is Naruto?" Kakashi gave her a serious look. Glancing away from the Hyuga princess, Kakashi uttered, "Hinata, Naruto's dead." Hinata looked at him in silence, as though she was waiting for him to joke that Naruto was hiding somewhere, but he never did. She glanced from Sasuke to Ino, but there was not the slightest snicker on either of their faces. Her eyes started to well up with tears, which she tried to conceal by turning away. No, he must be the one, she pondered. She turned to see it was Kakashi when she felt a firm hand grab her shoulder. He said, "Hinata, I'm sorry." The wind stung Hinata's streaked face as she brushed his hand away and hurried out the door as quickly as she could. She believed she heard someone call her name, but she didn't pause to find out. She soon discovered that she was outside the village's boundaries, a considerable distance away, and that the cold was much more intense. She saw what seemed to be traces of chakra slightly ahead of her when she activated her Byakugan. Hoping and praying that it was Naruto and that he was still alive, she sped off in that direction. Through a psychic connection that only Hinata was aware of, the 7 tails lay inside her seal, observing everything she did. The 7 tails thought gravely, "I'm sorry, kitten, but I don't think you'll find what you're looking for." Hinata trudged through the heavy snow, which crunched underfoot and made her pants legs feel as though 10-pound weights had been added. She quickly arrived at the location where she could see a tiny bit of chakra emanating from what appeared to be a frozen river. After increasing the chakra in her Byakugan, Hinata peered deep into the ice and saw what appeared to be a dead body. In order to see if any chakra was still flowing through the corpse's system, she increased the amount even further. Not so much as a dot of chakra was discovered, and hot tears stung her cold face. She then reduced the chakra in her eyes inside the corpse's system to see what or who it was. When she realized it was what looked to be a sleeping Naruto, she collapsed to her knees. Despite the fact that she had only known him for a short time, Hinata found herself crying more than she had ever done before because he had become closer to her than anyone had ever attempted to do. The pain of the loss she was experiencing made her whole body tremble and shiver. She looked down at the lifeless body, which appeared to be sleeping peacefully. Unchecked tears spilled from her lavender eyes onto the white snow, blurring her vision. Abruptly, she became aware of multiple chakra signatures all around her. Just as she was about to avoid an all-ice spike, she bounded up. 3 men or creatures were gathered around her when she dropped into the gentle fist stance. One of the creatures said in a wheezing voice, "You dare try to steal the ancient manuscripts." Hinata gave the creature a perplexed glance. She leapt into the air as a wave of ice swept toward her, saying, "Manuscripts? What Manu?" One of the creatures wheezed, "She's from the same village as that last group." "The same village where the previous group was? Naruto's killers are there," she pondered fiercely. As a result of this thought, she activated the 7 Tails chakra, causing her body to glow an electric blue and her once pupilless eyes to reveal 2 ghostly slitted pupils. Her face narrowed and became more feline as her canines grew longer and sharper. She let out a high-pitched roar that resembled a bobcat and a jaguar, and 2 whisker marks appeared on both of her cheeks. Hinata took a small step away from the guardians. One of the guardians wheezed, "So, she's one of them." Hinata then vanished and resurfaced in front of a guardian, slashing at it with her fingernails, which now resemble claws. In a whirl of wind and snow, the guardian vanished. Hinata glanced around and discovered that, despite her Byakugan being visible, the others had also vanished. Just in time to avoid a wave of ice, she leapt into the air. She then sidestepped a sharp piece of ice in midair. A staff composed entirely of ice then slammed her down, causing her body to fall limp to the ground. One of the guardians wheezed, "Foolish human, none can defeat us." Naruto's footsteps clapped damply on the water, like substance covering the floor as he moved through the sewer. Like corridors that housed his mind. Regardless of the direction he would take or the room he entered, he gazed straight ahead through the dark hallways. Like he was going to a favorite haunt he hadn't been to in years, he seemed to know exactly where he was going. Before long, he was in the chamber containing the Kyuubi's cage. A thin piece of paper bearing the words, "Seal," held the large bars together as Naruto approached them. Naruto said icily, "Looks like I've finally passed away. I'm sorry I have to spend eternity with you." The room reverberated with a dark, sinister laugh. "Dead? No, my dear boy, you are not dead, merely in a state of suspended animation, for now anyway, but your life force is fading. Sorrowful Kyuubi." Naruto gave a shoulder shrug. Without masking the steel in his voice, he said, "Good, that means that the world will finally be rid of you." The room echoed with Kyuubi's laughter once more. "If that is your choice, boy, then so be it, but I thought you might like to know, your mate is dying," Kyuubi grumbled. Suddenly, Naruto's previously unreadable facial expression became crystal clear. "What are you talking about? Hinata's at home safe and sound," replied Naruto. Once more, Kyuubi sneered. "She's here, I can sense not only her chakra, but the 7 Tails chakra as well, and both are fading fast. I'd give her another 2 hits, 3 tops, and she'll die. So kid, what will it be? Die, and take me with you? Or live and save your mate?" replied Kyuubi. Naruto gazed at him as though he had never seen him before. "What plans does he have? He must have told me that Hinata was in danger for a reason. However, perhaps there is no context for his cautions." He gave it some serious thought. The fox, which towered over him, glared at him almost ravenously as it awaited his choice, and he then looked into its bright red eyes. Then Naruto spoke his response, opening his mouth. As Hinata stumbled to her feet, the 7 Tails chakra began to fade and flickered around her. She felt a sharp blow to her stomach after gasping for as much air as she could, and her breath was painful and short. She was hurled backwards and struck the hard, ice-covered ground. Had turned into Naruto's tomb. A tiny tear dropped from Hinata's cheek as she gazed down at the frozen corpse beneath her. Then, feeling her coat lift her, she peered into one of the guardian's eyeless sockets. The guardian wheezed, "You wish to join him?" After closing her eyes and letting the last of the 7 Tails chakra leave her body, Hinata experienced a strange tingling feeling. She opened her eyes to see shrieking electricity. "Birds, lots of birds," sounded from the guardian's chest. Hinata hit the snowy ground with a soft thud as the guardian let out a wheeze that vanished. She found herself staring face to face with Kakashi-sensei, she exclaimed, gesturing behind him. Karinia destroyed the guardian that was about to kill him, and there was another low wheeze. After giving a grateful nod, Kakashi focused on the other guardians. In their wheezy voices, the other 3 began to laugh. Then the wheezy laughter reverberated around the ninjas. The ice underneath the ninjas started to melt, causing a huge water blast, and the ground beneath them started to tremble before solidifying into a massive wall of ice. The ice began to glow brightly as the guardians began to wheeze once more. As they felt their chakra being drained from their bodies, the ninjas collapsed to their knees. One of the guardians wheezed, "We shall revive our fallen with your lives." A wheezing chant filled the air as the guardians surrounded the ninjas, draining their chakra as the large wall of ice glowed a bright blue. Since Ino had the lowest chakra of the group, she was the first to pass out. Choji's face was white because he felt like his life was being sucked out of him. Shikamaru and Sasuke were on their knees, breathing heavily, and they weren't doing much better than he was. The wall that surrounded them was having an impact on all of the ninjas. Even though Hinata had the most chakra of the group, thanks in large part to the seven tails, she was beginning to lose consciousness. One of the guardians wheezed, "It won't be long now. Soon your lives will revive our fallen brethren, and you will be nothing but snow and ice." In a desperate attempt, Kakashi threw a kunai at the wall that had an explosive tag attached to it. About 10 feet of the wall was covered in smoke and flames after a big explosion. The crew waited anxiously and watched in horror as the smoke dissipated and the wall appeared to be essentially unharmed. Their ears were filled with a wheezy laughter. One of the guardians' wheezing voice reverberated throughout the wall as he said, "You fools! You cannot break this wall with mere toys. It is indestructible once it starts gathering chakra. No force on this planet can stop it. It's a pity that the dark-haired female used up most of her chakra trying to defeat us. She would have been more than enough to revive our fallen, but seeing that she was nearly drained of her chakra, she wouldn't have been able to revive one of their teeth," wheezed a different guardian. With their chakra almost completely depleted, Shikamaru and Choji fell into the snow with a dull crunching sound. It appeared as though Ino's body would pass into the next world like any other Minyu. Sasuke made a series of hand sighs, inhaling deeply and then letting go. At this point, his chakra was too low to employ his jutsu. Fear started to grip his chest tightly, making it difficult for him to breathe, stay conscious, and survive. As he struggled, a strange tingling sensation began to take over his eyes, and he began to see things more clearly, as though he were cleaning a dusty window. Then, as he gave in to chakra exhaustion, the sensation vanished along with all of his other senses. "That's 3 of your group down, humans. Soon we will have enough chakra to resurrect not only the ones that you killed, but also the ones that have fallen in previous years. Due to you humans and your greed in wanting to find the manuscript," wheezed a guardian. A low rumbling sound filled the ears of the ninjas who were still conscious. As the thunderous rumble grew louder, the ground beneath them started to shake. The wall's blue glow abruptly changed to a rich crimson red. One of the guardians wheezed, "What is happening?" as the wall began to split, releasing a faint red fog. Another guardian wheezed, "What is this chakra?" The portion of the wall that was on top of the ice wall fell as well because the ground underneath it broke. A great deal of the red fog was released as the wall section fell to the ground, filling in the crack with a thunderous crash. Hinata summoned the last of her remaining chakra and used her Byakugan to scan the ice beneath her, but all she saw was Naruto's lifeless corpse. However, this chakra, Hinata believed that these thoughts would be her final conscious ones before she too passed out from chakra exhaustion. It belongs to only one creature. Naruto gazed at the cage that contained the Kyuubi while he considered every possible scenario. He told the demon, "I've made my decision," and the Kyuubi asked. When Naruto said, "Revive me," the fox demon asked curiously, "You trust me? How do you know that I am not lying to you?" "No, I do not trust you, but I will not stay in this hell without wondering if there were any truth to your words. I will not be plagued with more blood on my hands than I already have," Naruto replied. The room reverberated with the demon fox's laughter. The Kyuubi's voice was full of joy as he said, "As you wish, human, I shall revive you." Before encircling Naruto, his scarlet-red chakra spread throughout the room like a thick fog, devouring everything in its path. He closed his eyes, saw nothing more, and did nothing to stop the chakra from capturing him. As more chakra began to seep out of the broken wall, the guardians began chanting more quickly in an effort to fix it. A 10-foot diameter scarlet-red spot appeared in the middle of the canyon, and the ground began to tremble once more. Steam began to rise from the red circle, causing the snow and ice that were beginning to fall in on themselves. The air rushed as a red chakra geyser erupted from beneath the ice. The ice wall had begun to melt and drip big globs of water, which caused the air to heat exponentially. As they waited to see what creature could produce such an aura of hatred, the guardians surrounded the chakra. Before they knew it, a scarlet-red claw had emerged from the newly created hole. As the claw touched the snow, it hissed, and the nails dug into the ground, releasing 5 tiny puffs of steam. Then a second set of claws appeared. These were also coated in a crimson-red chakra. A dark, menacing roar reverberated throughout the space. The single chakra tail of a fox. Like creature swished in anticipation as it climbed out of the hole. Its pupilled, slitted eyes were blood red. They scanned the area before settling on the two hardly conscious Junins and the unconscious Genins. The wall surrounding the ninjas broke as the creature let out another roar that could have broken the earth. As he recovered from the sonic boom created by the roar, one of the guardians wheezed, "What is this creature?" The creature vanished from view, then reappeared with his claw protruding from one of the guardians, causing a flash of red. As it began to absorb the guardian, the creature began to glow brightly. The guardian's scream was engulfed by its chakra, which then returned to the fox-like creature, silencing it. The remaining guardians were then targeted, and it slashed them, producing what looked like flaming blades. While the third guardian was sliced to ribbons and then caught fire, the other two were able to escape the blast. The fox creature roared with pleasure as it started to encircle his remaining prey, turning to ash before it even touched the ground. His bright red eyes seemed to pierce the guardians' very souls. When the fox's mouth opened, rows of sharp, razor-like teeth were visible. A ball of fire was then emitted by the creature at one of the guardians. When the guardian transformed into a block of ice, there was a swirl of snow. Then it broke under the force of the jutsu. The other guardians all wheezed together, "You are no ordinary creature." The snow hissed beneath the fox's paws, forming a barrier that resembled steam, and it snarled at the guardians as it hunkered low to the ground. There was a low hissing sound beneath the guardians as the two crimson-red claws, which were made entirely of chakra, exploded from beneath the ground, leaving only a crimson-red glow in their wake. The guardians leapt to the said, inches from the claws. One of the guardians remarked, "He's more cunning than we'd first thought he was." The other guardian remarked, "There is something familiar about this creature." The creature had suddenly materialized and punched the guardian, removing his brother's head from his shoulders. The other guardian never heard what it was. The creature's glowing blood red seemed to burn straight into the guardian's soul as he gazed at the final guardian. The guardian was unable to move his body or take his eyes off the creature, so he just stared back into its eyes and felt nothing but fear. In an instant, the creature slashed him in the chest, tearing his heart and internal organs to pieces. Then, like it was savoring a rare treat, the creature started to feast on the guardian's insides. With a mixture of regret and terror, Kakashi and Kurenai gazed at the carnage that was taking place in front of them. They had taken over Naruto. He had lost his humanity. Kurenai questioned, "What do we do, Kakashi?" Instead of responding to her, Kakashi simply gazed at the creature as it defeated the guardians one by one, as though they were merely an inconvenience. Kurenai's cry of, "Kakashi!" snapped Kakashi out of his reverie in time to witness the creature approaching them at a leisurely pace. With each step it took, tiny puffs of steam hissed into the chilly air, leaving a steamy footprint behind. The creature took a deep breath as its eyes moved from Kurenai to Kakashi and back again, seemingly debating which one to kill first. The fear that pervaded the air around them seemed to be trying to be smelled. What was left of the wall was broken by the creature's second earth-shaking roar, which produced a massive acoustic boom. Kakashi, Kurenai, and the unconscious genin were also knocked through the air by the force, but they were met by a gentle mountain of snow. The chakra dissipated, exposing an unconscious Naruto as the creature's aura began to fade away as it fell forward. A burst of white light appeared as though it were bursting from the temple's ruins. Then it disappeared, and Kurenai and Kakashi turned to see Naruto holding an extremely old and ancient scroll. After putting the scroll in Naruto's pouch, Kakashi approached him and lifted him onto his shoulder. Kurenai looked at him inquisitively while she tried to bring the other genin back to life. Kakashi put Naruto down and performed a series of hand signals before saying, "This scroll was meant for him, and he shall be the one to have it." Summoning jutsu, he exclaimed, slamming his hand to the concrete. Before the two Junin, a pack of ninja hounds of different breeds emerged, creating a huge plume of smoke. When he shouldered Naruto, Kakashi said, "Carry the others back to the village." The dogs, who appeared more like pack mules than dogs, began to hoist the unconscious genin onto their backs while barking repeatedly. After 3 days, as the village gates came into view, the group of ninjas gazed joyfully at them. Naruto hurried to the gate, Hinata trailing closely behind. Both of them were eager to share the events of their first mission with their parents. Kurenai and Kakashi laughed together as they saw the two run off hand in hand. Kurenai smiled contentedly and said, "It seems almost like they're meant to be together, doesn't it?" Kakashi's mask curled into a smile as he said, "Yes, it does. Yes, indeed it does." Naruto was lying on the lush green grass that covered the Hyuga compound's yard. As the sun started to set over the village, his blue eyes gazed up at the blood-red sky. Iodine and some sort of antibacterial cleaner were the first smells Naruto smelled when he woke up, but he also smelled something else. There was a faint weight on his chest, and it had a vanilla scent. He noticed a mane of dark, silky hair when he looked down. As he caressed the sleeping beauty's hair, a tiny smile came to his face. He heard a low moan slip from her throat and lay happily. Hinata's eyes were barely open when she looked up. Naruto grinned. He laughed and said, "Well, look who's having a bad hair day." The sound of his voice seemed to awaken Hinata, as her eyes popped open at the sound. "Naruto!" she exclaimed joyfully. Then Naruto was drawn into a hug that crushed his bones. He had to halt his speech when Hinata's lips touched his. "Well, if this is the kind of welcome I get, maybe I'll get frozen in." It appeared as though Naruto's senses had stopped working. His thoughts and emotions were racing through his head. Unsure of what to do, he followed his instincts and gave her a kiss in return. They kissed for a few seconds before letting go to catch their breath. The two teenagers were experiencing a flurry of emotions that were beyond words. Naruto grinned as he mentally reenacted the incident. In addition to their first kiss, he had finally ceased experiencing the nightmares that had followed him ever since Isaribi's passing. Hinata was more than simply his girlfriend. She was his lifeline and his remedy. He leapt to his feet and hurried back to the main house for dinner as soon as he heard his mother call. He was giddy with anticipation, eager to share with them what had transpired in the land of snow. The following morning, Naruto was beaming broadly because Kakashi-sensei had promised them a surprise the day before. Without saying much more, he hurried out of the house after hurriedly getting dressed and eating breakfast. Before long, he was at the customary meeting place. He curled up in his favorite tree and started to doze off until he heard something. There was a shout from a short distance. "Hey, watch where you're going, you little punk." Thinking it was a young child who was becoming a bit too rowdy, Naruto decided to ignore it. "Hey, put him down," said a second person. Naruto was drawn to this because it was Hinata's voice. Leaping to his feet, he ran to the location where he had heard the voices. A boy in black robes and a cowl said, "Oh well, what do we have here? He's your boyfriend, awfully young for you, isn't he?" Purple lines were painted on his face. A blonde girl with her hair tied in pigtails said, "Kankuro, leave the little lovebirds alone." She was dressed in a purple miniskirt and a tan shirt, and she had a huge fan strapped to her back. "I will tamari after I teach this little punk not to respect his betters," Kankuro replied. Hinata screamed, "Let him go," as she struck Kankuro with a soft fist, causing him to scream in agony. The child then scampered off, shouting his gratitude as he dropped him. Kankuro grabbed Hinata by the throat, his face twisted in anger. "You little..." Kankuro started to say, but Naruto broke his wrist before he could finish, so he screamed in agony. Hinata had a mild coughing fit after Kankuro let her fall to the ground. Naruto assisted her in standing up. Kankuro reset his wrist and said, "Kid, you have no idea who you're messing with." A voice that sounded almost raspy said, "Enough, Kankuro, you'll only disgrace yourself further." The group turned to look at a boy who had dark hair and black circles under his eyes that gave the impression that he hadn't slept for an extended period of time. He had what looked like red ink tattooed on his forehead, the kanji for love. He had a big gourd strapped to his back with a cork blocking its opening, and he was dressed in black pants and a tan shirt. The boy pointed to Naruto and asked, "What is your name?" Naruto said, "Give me yours first." "I am Gaara of the desert," the boy declared without even blinking. Naruto declared, "My name is Naruto Uzumaki." The gourd's cork abruptly burst off and flew in Naruto's direction, who grabbed Hinata and leapt aside. Hinata angrily retorted, "Naruto, put me down. I can handle myself, you know." After putting her down and snickering, Naruto leapt back to dodge a sandblast. Naruto thought, "There's something strange about this guy." Then he made a sign with just one hand. He yelled, "Shadow Clone Jutsu." The real Naruto remained behind and watched to see if the clones could harm Gaara in any way, while 3 copies of him emerged from a huge puff of smoke. He saw the third of his clones crushed and 2 knocked backward by what seemed to be a barrier of sand. Naruto shuddered as he recalled the fight and the scant information they had learned about the individual. When Naruto leapt from the tree, his eyes blazed with a fiery rage, but his face was emotionless. Gaara gave Naruto a mildly curious look in return. Gaara remarked, "You're the same as me." Naruto gave him the same inquisitive look. "What do you?" he asked, but before he could finish, the 3 vanished in a burst of sand. With caution, Naruto scanned his surroundings, his senses alert to any sign of the ninjas. With a clang of metal, he leapt back and threw a kunai. When Naruto realized that Kakashi-sensei was the target of the kunai he had thrown, his face twitched a little. Naruto, I thought I told you to meet us at the training grounds," replied Kakashi. The child that Kankuro had threatened to kill said, "Sorry, sensei. I had to help. He was helping me, sir." Kakashi gave a head nod. "Well, Naruto, hurry up, I've got a special announcement to make to you and your teammates," replied Kakashi. Naruto nodded and accompanied him to the training, which took a little longer than expected because Naruto wanted to check on Hinata before they left. With her arms folded across her chest, Ino demanded, "All right, Kakashi-sensei, what's this big announcement?" Naruto and Sasuke both rolled their eyes and gazed at their sensei when they saw this display. "Well, I just wanted to inform you that in a week's time you three will be taking part in the Chunin exams," Kakashi replied with a grin. The three genin gazed at him in awe. Did they hear him correctly? Was this a joke? The genins thought about many of these things. There was a long pause before Kakashi finally spoke again. "You three will now be training on your own. I will be training Sasuke. Ino, I'm sure your father will want to get you ready. And Naruto, I believe you'll find Jiraiya at the hot springs," replied Kakashi. While Sasuke remained with Kakashi, Ino walked back to her house, and Naruto gave a small shake of his head before heading toward the hot springs. After what would be his last training session before the upcoming Chunin exams, Naruto walked home. Although Master informed him that, he was reasonably certain that he would perform exceptionally well and hoped to make Chunin exams focused on your methods for success rather than just your jutsu. According to him, even if a ninja receives the best possible score on an exam, they may still fail it and have to retake it the following year. Soon after, Naruto discovered Hinata waiting for him at the Hyuga compound. She had been doing this for the previous 7 days. On this occasion, though, her father was standing next to her, a small package in his hands. Naruto bowed to both of them and said, "Hello Hinata, father." Although he and Hinata had become a couple, he dared not do anything while they were inside the compound. He handed Naruto the package and said, "Your mother and I have been thinking about this, and we agreed that if you're going to be part of this family, you should start dressing like it." After opening the package, Naruto took out a set of gray robes, a white sash, and a pair of black pants. He gazed at the gift as if it were a priceless heirloom, even though it was only a few pieces of fabric. This was a rite of passage for Naruto, who had learned a lot of Hyuga traditions and customs. Everyone would have to recognize him as a member of the Hyuga main branch because of this basic article of clothing. With a respectful bow to Hiyashi, Naruto said, "Thank you, father." Hiyashi rubbed Naruto's head like a little kid and laughed. Hiyashi said impatiently, "Well, don't just stand there, boy. Go change and let's see how you look." After bowing once more, Naruto hurried back to his room to quickly get ready for dinner. Naruto hurriedly put his old clothes in the box with his new ones and changed out of them. Then, just in case he wanted to wear them again, he slipped them under his bed. Then he moved toward his room's mirror, which was positioned against the wall. He was astounded by how well the clothes fit him. If it weren't for a few details, he would have been a decent Hyuga. Anger and rage welled up inside Neji as he watched from a distance as his uncle gave Naruto the gift. It should have been mine, but how could that wretch have it? Outraged, he thought. Then he sensed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Soon, my son, soon. That will be you standing in his place, and I will be the clan head," said Neji's father. As they left the tearful moment, Neji bowed to his father in a respectful manner. Hurrying to the academy, where the first round of exams would be held, Naruto and Hinata sped through the village. The two genin were excited as they considered rising to the next rank and receiving even more advanced jutsu instruction from their senseis. After arriving at the academy, they sat and bided their time until their teammates arrived. When they came upon the sizable sparring circle, they started to look around. Leaning her head on Naruto's shoulder, Hinata remarked, "Hard to believe that a month ago you and I fought in there like bitter rivals." Gazing at the battle he and Hinata had, which seemed to have taken place ages ago, Naruto grinned. Before long, the shrill voice that belonged to Ino was ringing in his ears. The Yamanaka cried out, "Naruto, what are you doing?" Unfortunately, fate is a cruel mistress, especially since he was paired with Ino. Naruto sighed, wishing he could have spent more time with Hinata. After giving Hinata a quick peck on the cheek, he approached Ino, who was now infatuated with Sasuke. Naruto asked icily, "So we gonna go do this or are you gonna keep trying to move a mountain, Ino?" Ino gave him a look as if he had said something foolish. She angrily remarked, "I'm not trying to move a mountain. I'm trying to get Sasuke to like me." Naruto shook his head and let out a sigh. He thought, and here we have a perfect example of why everyone says that blondes are dumb. He gazed at Sasuke, who appeared to be having similar thoughts. Behind them, there was an abrupt burst of air, followed by a dust cloud that surrounded Hinata before Choji was visible. The eyes of Naruto, Ino, Sasuke, and Hinata were now resting on the ground. With hearts appearing to bulge from his eyes, Choji said, "Oh Hinata, my love, I've dreamed of the day when we both became Chunin. If we both do, will you please become my wife?" When Hinata's expression changed to one of complete disgust, Naruto approached and struck Choji in the head, sending him to the ground. Hinata noticed that Choji had been rendered unconscious when she looked down at him. Ino yelled angrily, "Naruto, what do you think you're doing?" Naruto said, "Nothing that concerns you, Ino," with the composure of someone discussing a fresh bouquet of flowers. For a moment, Ino just stared at him in awe, but then Sasuke grunted, drawing her gaze back to him. Sasuke gave Naruto a nod of gratitude, and Hinata gave him a sly smile while shaking her head. She placed her hands on her hips and remarked, "You know I'm more than capable of handling him." When Naruto stuck his tongue out at her, she punched him in the shoulder. Shikamaru then appeared, and the six of them started looking for the building. Naruto experienced a chill as soon as they stepped inside the structure. Sensing genjutsu was one of the many skills he had mastered from his years of training with Jiraiya. Before he could truly understand the purpose of the jutsu, he made a quick hand sign and dispelled it. He saw Sasuke, Shikamaru, and Hinata making the same hand gesture he had just made. After that, they proceeded through the academy's hallways and corridors in search of the room where they would be taking the tests, eventually arriving at the building's final floor. After dispelling the genjutsu, they were able to locate their room number rather easily. They then had to persuade Choji and Ino that the door was actually there. When they opened the door, they saw that there were roughly 150 applicants from 50 teams. After the groups were divided, Naruto was fortunate enough to be placed next to Hinata, with whom he got along well. After deciding to hold off on wearing the new clothes his parents had given him until after he passed the test, Naruto took off his black coat and slid it over the back of his chair. Staring at the clock that hung over the large blackboard in front of them, the groups sat and waited. A man in a big black trench coat was wearing a headband over his head to conceal the top of his head, and there was a big puff of smoke at the front of the room when it reached noon. "Hello maggots. Listen closely because I will not repeat myself, and I will not answer any questions. My name is Ibiki and I will be your instructor today. You will start off with 100 points. There are 10 questions total, 9 of them are on the paper that has just been passed out to you. I will give you the 10th question 10 minutes till 1. As you may have noticed, there are several Chunin and Junin in this room. They will be checking for any cheating. You get caught 3 times, you and your entire team will fail. You will then never be allowed to become Chunin. There are also several Junin hidden amongst you. They will also be partaking in this part of the test. You have 1 hour. Begin." As people started writing down their names and responding to the questions, there was the sound of tapping and erasing. An enemy ninja is standing in a tree 100 meters above you when you invade an enemy camp. To hit him, how much angle would you need to throw a kunai? Read Naruto. What on earth is this? I never heard anything about a written exam from Master. He never really tells me anything, now that I think about it, but that isn't the point. I am unsure of what I should do, he thought anxiously. All of a sudden, he was reminded of his training trip with Jiraiya. Sometimes a ninja must look underneath the surface of what he thinks he sees. It was easy enough to understand. Always check to see if something or someone's actions have a hidden meaning or purpose. Then it dawned on him that they were attempting to defraud them by having Junin in the group and stationing the guards around the test groups. They were attempting to assess their proficiency in obtaining information. Yurjia's voice resurfaced in his mind. A ninja isn't a true ninja if he gets caught while gathering information. Naruto grinned. I'm grateful, Master, he thought. After that, he made a brief series of hand signals. He thought, ninja art. External sight jutsu. When he realized that he could now see through people and things with just a thought, his eyes began to glow a vivid blue. Jiraiya referred to it as a pseudo Byakugan. Even though Jiraiya was supposed to find it easier to gather his research, Naruto grinned at his master's ingenuity. Naruto glanced at each individual before settling on one who appeared to be well versed in all the material covered in the test. Ah, Junin. He pondered. Then, wondering if Ino and Sasuke had figured it out yet, he started copying everything the Junin was writing down on the paper. He happened to look back and noticed that Ino's mind transfer jutsu had already rendered her unconscious. He turned to face Sasuke and saw that he had activated his Sharingan because his eyes were blood red. Hinata was not using her Byakugan, as he could see. With a smile on his lips, he thought, I'm in love with a genius. Behind him, a kunai struck the desk with a loud thud. Entry number 12. Fail. Entry numbers 23 and 42 also failed. Naruto heaved a sigh of relief, assuming that Hinata's or one of his teammates had failed, which would have been bad news for both of them. Because unless they were forced to fail by some unanticipated circumstance, their mother would not allow either of them to fail this exam. For example, they may have exaggerated their own deaths, but occasionally they questioned how far from reality this was. Naruto felt as though it went on forever, and the other Chunin hopefuls looked up when they heard the chalkboard in front of them click. Alright, it's time for the 10th question. If you answer this question correctly, you will go on to the next round. If you answer it incorrectly, you and your entire team will fail. If you want to leave now, do it and come back and try again next year, Ibiki replied. More than half of the Chunin hopefuls had risen and gone, causing numerous chairs to scrape the floor. Ibiki spoke again after he was certain. Ibiki exclaimed, "To those of you who remain, you all pass." After the other genin stared at him in complete disbelief, Ibiki started explaining to them what Naruto believed he meant. A window was shattered and a woman who appeared to be no older than 18 or 20 years old was involved in the crash. "Alright, you maggots. Get ready for the second round," she yelled. Ibiki furiously rubbed his face. Through his hand, he said, "Anko, you're early again." Anko rubbed the back of her head and grinned. She looked at the still rather sizable group of genin that remained in the room and said, "Sorry, guess I got a little too excited." She said, "Ibiki, you've gotten soft." With a slightly deranged smile, she said, "Alright, maggots, pay attention. My name is Anko, and I will be your teacher for the second exam round, which will be held in Training Ground 44. Given that Training Ground 13 had been designated restricted, a number of the Konoha shinobi urgently whispered among themselves. It was said that only the highest-ranking Anbu were permitted to train there because of the numerous dangerous animals and traps that could be found within its boundaries. Naruto glanced up at the woman in front of them. She was dressed in a black fishnet shirt and a big overcoat that didn't leave much room for interpretation. Additionally, she was wearing a tiny miniskirt that somehow managed to conceal the contents underneath. She wore her purple hair in a ponytail with spikes. She gazed around the room with her gray eyes. She yelled, "Okay, you maggots, you've received your orders. Now follow me," and leapt out the window she had just entered. As she landed softly on the ground, the class watched in wonder. She then turned to face them. With a loud roar, the remaining genin rushed out of the building to meet Anko. "Well, hurry it up, I ain't got all day," they exclaimed. A Konochi from a more recent village named Otto passed by Naruto as he and the other genin were strolling through the village. Her face was wrapped up to her dazzling red eyes. He couldn't stop staring at her for a few moments while wearing what looked like bandages. He thought, there's something familiar about her. He chose to ignore it for the time being because they had just arrived at a sizable forest that was surrounded by what appeared to be miles of chain link fencing. While a Chunin handed out papers to the genin, Anko said, "Alright, you maggots, listen up. Before we send you into the forest, we need you to fill out these consent forms." She smirked as she said, "This is just so if you get killed while you're in there, the village isn't held liable for your untimely death." The faces of the man of the genin turned to fear. "If any of you are having second thoughts and wish to back out and try again next time, you're more than welcome to do so now," Anko replied. After hearing these words, a number of the genin raised their hands and were led back to the village. They could choose to stay and support their remaining teammates or go home. The fact that Hinata's team was not giving up on this challenge pleased Naruto. Seeing that neither Sasuke nor Ino were ending their relationship, he quickly filled out his consent form and returned it to the Chunin who had given it to him. Anko helped her get back into the Chunin's good graces after they had gathered all of the papers. She then produced 2 scrolls of various colors and said, "Now that everyone has signed their consent forms, I'll tell you why." Heaven and Earth were the seals on the 2, one of which was green and the other blue, and she held them in her right hand. "Alright, so this is your goal. You will be competing with one another to steal the scroll of another team while you are there. Before you can enter the tower in the middle of the forest, you must have one of each scroll. When you first enter the forest, you will have one. You will then need to locate a team and battle them for theirs. After the Chunin distributes your scroll to each person, you will draw a number from the box he is holding," Anko stated. Naruto's team drew gate number 15, Hinata's team drew gate number 7, and Anko told them to go 2 of the gate numbers they drew after the Chunin went around the teams, gave them a scroll, and let them draw a number from the box. "When your gate opens, you will begin the test," Anko replied. After making their way to the gate marked with the number 15, Naruto's team ran into the forest in search of a small clearing that would give them the best cover possible to set up an ambush. They were only there for a few seconds before the gate exploded open. Naruto pointed to a large oak in front of them and said, "Okay, here's what we should do. I'll position myself in the tree to the north there. He pointed to a particularly large clump of bushes and said, Sasuke, given how you've gone to the Sharingan now, I think your best position would be in that tree to the south. Sasuke had to admit that the plan seemed sound, so he didn't argue for a change and hid in the tree Naruto had pointed out to him. The clearing they had chosen was exactly what they had been looking for. It was a direct shot to the goal should anyone try to leave early. The trees and bushes grew so close together that it was almost impossible for anyone to make it through in any direction. There was a fair amount of grass in this particular clearing, which was a bonus to the ninjas because it provided excellent cover for a few traps. The group created a copy of the Earth Scroll they were given and placed it at the edge of the clearing's northern section to make the space seem a little friendlier. With a frustrated expression, Ino thought, "Come on Naruto, there isn't a ninja alive who would be dumb enough to fall for that trick." She quickly regretted her statement when a group of grass genin began to approach the scroll, setting off 3 of their traps. Ino stared at the now hanging grass ninjas, completely taken aback. As she attempted to replace her eyes in their sockets, she thought, "You have got to be kidding me. Someone was actually stupid enough to fall for that." After searching the ninjas, Naruto and Sasuke discovered that they were carrying the precise scroll they required. Naruto gave his teammates a corny smile and remarked, "Wow, talk about lucky. I think we may have beat the old record. How on earth did you even imagine that someone would fall for something so blatantly obvious, Naruto?" After they had started to move through the forest in the direction of the tower, Ino asked. They were ambushed by ninjas from the Sound Village when they had just arrived at the tower, which was composed of a mixture of red and gray bricks. One of them was the woman who gave Naruto a strangely familiar feeling that he simply couldn't place, and the other was dressed in black pants and a tan shirt, with a kunai holster strapped to his right leg instead of a headband. His headband covered most of his head, leaving only a tuft of black hair in the back. His cold gray eyes gazed at the 3 ninjas in front of him, seemingly searching for the scroll or scrolls they might be carrying. The third ninja was wearing a blue long sleeve shirt and a pair of black pants, with a kunai holster strapped to his left leg. His headband was tied around his right shoulder, and his eyes were the darkest shade of blue that a human could acquire. The girl moved forward, pulling a kunai from the holster on her right leg, which was covered in blue pants. The wrappings around her face only slightly muffled the girl's voice as she said, "It's been a long time, Naruto." "Do I know you?" Naruto asked, gazing at her with interest. "I'm sure you do, but I know all about you," she said in a seductive tone. "Who?" Before Naruto could finish his question, the girl charged at him quickly. He sprang to the side just in time to avoid the slash she had in store for him. With a clear smile on her covered face, the girl repeated, "Very good Naruto. You've improved greatly since the last time we saw each other." Then he drew one of his own kunai and ran at the girl, saying, "Look, I don't know who you are, but I'm going to find out." The battle seemed to be at a standstill as neither side allowed the other to move, and her partners joined in as they each captured Sasuke and Ino. The girl gave Naruto a little giggle after what felt like hours. "All right, enough playing time to get serious," she replied. After a few moments of staring at her with curiosity, Naruto received the surprise of his life when she began to gather her chakra. Had it not been for the fact that the chakra was crimson red, this would have surprised him. It was frightening to see how much the chakra she was using resembled his own, and Naruto stared at her in shock. "How is that chakra?" The girl's pupils had changed to vertical slits, and her eyes were now blazing red. She said, "Wouldn't you like to know?" and then vanished from Naruto's view. Then, as the girl materialized behind him, Naruto felt a burning sensation on his right shoulder. He stared in shock. He thought anxiously, "She moved so fast that I couldn't even see her. What is causing Naruto's fear?" she asked in a naive manner. Naruto kept thinking about the individual before him. "She's not your typical girl, and she somehow recognizes me, I thought." The girl abruptly stood up, and the red aura that had been surrounding her vanished. He was startled out of his reverie as she vanished from his view once more, and he leapt into the air just in time to avoid being cut in two. She nodded to her teammates after saying, "Okay, I think I've gotten what I needed," and then the 3 of them vanished in a thick cloud of smoke. After that, the 3 returned their weapons to their holsters. "Who was that girl Naruto, and what was the whole point of that?" Ino inquired. "I honestly wish I knew, but I don't recall ever meeting her before in my life," replied Naruto. "Whoever she was, it appeared that she knew you quite well. What was that red chakra?" Sasuke, who had just changed his kunai, said. Instead of responding to this question, Naruto led the way to the tower, where they discovered that they were the second team to arrive. Gaara's team had arrived nearly 30 minutes earlier, completely breaking the previous record for the fastest time through the forest. After opening both scrolls, they were engulfed in a thick cloud of smoke. Then, with his signature orange book in hand, Kakashi passed through the cloud. With a somewhat bored-like tone, he said, "Hello my students." After explaining to them what would happen next and the purpose of the second test, Kakashi vanished in a cloud of smoke. Only roughly 5 teams had made it to the tower with their scrolls and lives by the end of the week, so the Hokage declared that they would have. He then gave them a month to get ready for the next round of exams, explaining that this would be more of a tournament than anything else and that more would be made clear in that time. Naruto's body and mind hurt as he stumbled into his room on the last day of training before his match in 2 days. In order to inform Naruto of the stories contained in the scrolls, Jiraiya had finally had them translated. Rewind Naruto was extremely exhausted after their training in Training Ground 14, so Jiraiya called him to sit next to him. As he took the scrolls out of his hip pouch, Jiraiya remarked, "I must say you've improved tremendously, Naruto." Naruto had been training in a wide open field a good distance east of the village, and he was perched atop a rather rotten log. Jiraiya was watching him from the forest, which was just to the north of the training area. Naruto collapsed on the grass next to him, panting, and wiped his perspiration streaked face on his shirt sleeve. He waited for Jiraiya to explain what he had discovered after reading the scrolls, his blue eyes fixed on him. "Well Naruto, as you know, the Akatsuki is after the Biju sealed within you. For what purpose we don't yet know. Although, I theorize that they may very well be trying to do what the ancients that are written in these scrolls tried to do." Jiraiya was unrolling the first scroll. "We are going to try a new strategy and seal them inside a slab of stone to permanently contain them until we can harness their power. There are 4 beasts whose powers are feared by even our greatest kings. The beasts have the ability to control the very elements surrounding them. Their power is incalculable." Jiraiya rolled up the scroll and said, "Our ninjas will be trying to seal the beasts away and finally free us from their horrid powers. The stone we will be using has been blessed with the chakras of every king in the land." Naruto remarked, "Well, that was kinda short." Jiraiya shook his hand at this unimportant detail, saying, "The rest just describes what the stone was made from, and what seals they put on it." The second scroll he unrolled. "This one tells of the actual sealing, and what happened afterwards," Jiraiya replied. "We waited patiently as the creatures made their way towards us. Their immense powers pressed down upon us like an enormous boulder. Their very footsteps caused the very ground to shake. Each inhale of breath felt like a mighty windstorm. The one creature was a gigantic black 3-headed dog. Its eyes are as red as blood. The pupils look like 2 black crescent moons. Its chakra glowed bright red against the setting sun. The one beside it is a gigantic white horse. It had 2 large white wings. Its eyes were a beautiful gold color. The last creature had black fur, a snake-like head, with blue eyes and crescent-shaped pupils. We stood there on bated breath awaiting our fates as to what was going to come. We only prayed that we'd make it through this fight. The creature's immense powers were unlike anything we'd ever seen before. I still tremble to this day when I think about their incredible powers. We got the stone red for what we hoped would be the last battle with the creatures. Nobody had predicted what would happen that day. As we made the final preparations for the battle, we discovered to our horror that the stone we'd made was not meant for what we'd thought it was, but instead it was to be a temporary container for the creature's immense powers. We had to act quickly, or risk their powers falling into the wrong hands. We quickly selected 9 beasts that have been known to possess supernatural powers. A raccoon, a horse, a turtle, a dog, an ox, a badger, a cat, a snake, and a fox. We had no idea that by mixing the terrible powers of these 3 monsters with those of these weaker ones, we would forever doom the world. It cuts off there. I guess the person who wrote it didn't get to finish it, Jiraiya replied. So you believe the Akatsuki are attempting to fulfill whatever purpose that stone was intended for? Naruto inquired. A fair possibility exists. We cannot allow anything the Akatsuki may be doing to be neglected, Jiraiya stated. So, what ought we to do? Naruto inquired. For now you will just take part in the Chunin exams. Leave the information gathering to me and Itachi for the time being, Jiraiya replied. Naruto gave a head nod. As you wish, Master Jiraiya. Final flashback. The memory was replaying in Naruto's head as he lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling, but he was also bothered by something else. I know that girl had the Kyuubi's cower, but how and where did she get it? He asked himself. After breakfast, he decided to take a short stroll around the village to see if he could come up with an idea for how that girl obtained the Kyuubi's chakra, but he didn't notice anyone walking in front of him until he bumped into them. He continued to think about these things until he fell asleep, and he didn't wake up until the following morning. He apologized to the individual for not paying attention to his direction. A sweet sounding female voice said, "That's not good, Naruto. A ninja must always be vigilant." Naruto's face curled into a glare as he turned to see that it was the girl from yesterday. "How did you obtain the Kyuubi's chakra, and who are you?" In a low voice, Naruto inquired. A tiny smile curved under the girl's mask as she laughed. Her tone was sweet and almost innocent as she said, "That's for me to know, and you to find out, Naruto. Although I am a bit disappointed that you don't recognize me, but oh well, all will be revealed tomorrow." She vanished from his sight, and when he turned to see who had tapped him on the shoulder, he found no one there. This greatly alarmed Naruto, who wondered how far she had come in controlling the Kyuubi's power and what if she was truly an enemy of the village and was planning to destroy it. In that case, he would be the fall guy because he is the only known container of the Kyuubi's limitless chakra. After deciding it was time to have a brief conversation with his tenant, Naruto proceeded to the Hokage's mountain, the one location where he could always be left alone to think, and encountered a mix of welcome smiles and doubtful looks as he walked through the village. Naruto returned the smiles with one of his own and chose to ignore the looks. Through her mask, the girl smiled as she watched Naruto head for the Hokage's mountain, then continued on through the village and out into the forest just beyond the gates, passing through dense shrubs, leaf litter, and twigs that made no sound at all, until she eventually came upon an abandoned shack with windows that had been smashed out by children, the weather, or simply the animals. The wood that made up the house rotted out in some places, and holes were visible in the walls. When the girl entered the shack, she saw a man wearing gray robes, black pants, and a big purple rope tied to his back. She bowed to the man, whose crescent moon pupils and yellow eyes never left her, and whose milk-white face curled into a smile. "Has he already figured it out?" Without waiting for her to say anything, the man asked. "No, Lord Orochimaru, he hasn't. It's a bit disappointing knowing that he was trained by two of the legendary Sannin, and he can't even connect the dots," the young woman replied. Orochimaru grinned. "That is perfect for our plans then. This means the boy won't be able to interfere once we get the ball rolling for the destruction of that accursed village," Orochimaru replied. A smile curved the girl's masked face. She bowed and said, "I live to serve you, my lord." She then gave him more details about the different ninjas that surrounded the village, including where they were posted, how frequently they switched shifts, and even how many times a day each one took a bathroom break. Even after the girl left, Orochimaru's pale face continued to smile. "Everything is proceeding as planned. The Sand Village will soon carry out their attack strategy on Konoha. In the meantime, I'll work covertly and travel to the Hokage's Forbidden Jutsu Scrolls Vault. The very thing that will enable me to bring Konoha to its knees will then be taken by me. The fourth Hokage's Ultimate Jutsu. The Flash Step Jutsu," Orochimaru muttered to himself as he continued to mentally go over each step of his strategy. If he was going to succeed, everything had to be flawless. Naruto sat on top of the fourth Hokage's head and stared at the setting sun. He had spent the entire day lounging, resting, and trying to figure out who that girl was. When nightfall arrived, he made the decision to put the matter out of his mind for the time being, but it continued to torment him through the night and into the following morning. The tournament day and his opportunity to become Chunin were things he was truly looking forward to. He told himself in his room's mirror, "Time to show em what you're made of," and then he left. As he strolled through the village with his head held high and a big smile on his face, he received a lot of well wishes and best wishes from the people of the other towns, but he couldn't help but smile even more when he thought about what they would do if they knew that he was the same kid who the fourth Hokage had sealed the Kyuubi inside 3 years ago. He knew the kind of treatment that people like him received from the other people in their villages, and as he listened to these stories as a child, he couldn't help but wonder what he would have been like if he hadn't been taken in by Jiraiya. Would he have suffered the same fate as many other Jinchuriki, living alone, angry at everyone around him, hating them, wanting to destroy them? He was glad that Jiraiya had chosen to take him in all those years ago, or he probably wouldn't be the person he is today. After being informed that they were to meet at the arena in the center of the village, Naruto carried on strolling through it. The only issue was that he didn't know where it was and neglected to ask before leaving. He felt like the biggest fool in the village now. How could he have forgotten to ask for directions? "Oh, my mother is going to murder me," he pondered. He kept on walking through the village, glad that he had left early because otherwise he would not have had time to look around and try to locate the location as he was now. Like the Hokage's tower, he had hoped it would be easy to spot, but boy was he mistaken. After what seemed like hours of walking through the village, he finally lost it and asked a woman for directions to the arena. After she gave him the information, he started running in a dead sprint in the direction of the arena. To increase his speed and make it there in time, he only used a small portion of his chakra. He had just arrived at the arena when a huge explosion caused the building to collapse. revealing a gigantic raccoon composed entirely of sand. Naruto thought, "Oh shit," when he saw the raccoon. The voice in his head yelled, "Get out of there, kid, it's Shikaku." People who had been in the arena and had not been crushed by the debris screamed in fear as Naruto shook his head. Shikaku exclaimed, "Yeehaw! I'm free to destroy and wreak havoc." A bright blue chakra flashed, followed by a cat-like yowl, and then a giant bright blue seven-tailed cat rose from the ground as Naruto's eyes flashed a dangerous glare at the demon. Shikaku yelled, I'll kill you," as he buried the cat and chased her with a wave of sand. "Hinata!" Naruto yelled. Before the sand covering the cat exploded and began to float through the air like a dense dust, there was a sound of thunder. As he turned and resumed his run, he thought, "Well, I guess she doesn't need my help after all." "Don't worry Naruto, Hinata is fine. You need to get to the Hokage. I fear something terrible is going to happen," the cat replied. With the thought in his head, Naruto took off in the direction of the Hokage's tower without needing to be reminded twice. Why would she be interested in the Hokage? In order to protect me from harm, he reasoned, unless Hinata asked her to tell me that. When he halted and returned his attention to the fight, he saw that the cat had turned one of Shikaku's legs to glass using lightning. Shikaku yelled, "Damn you, I'll kill you," the cat said, "You can try Kun, you can try." When Naruto saw that she had everything under control, he laughed. Two explosions occurred close to the city's walls, and after they fell to the ground, hundreds of sand ninjas began to flood the streets in an attempt to protect as many people as possible. Unfortunately, he was unable to protect everyone, and as he watched several people being killed by the sand ninjas, memories of that day with Isaribi began to resurface. He was failing once more, allowing people to suffer, and he was determined not to allow it to happen again or cause any more deaths. After drawing his kunai and disappearing from where he was standing, Naruto began to slash down a large number of the sand ninjas who were attacking the civilians, as if he had blacked out. They never saw him coming because he would strike quickly and forcefully with lethal accuracy, as a ninja should, leaving no evidence of his presence. He soon realized that someone was observing him while he was doing this. He was unsure of who or where they were, but he was aware that they were there and that he needed to reach the Hokage as soon as possible. Naruto used the appearance of a huge purple barrier atop the Hokage's tower as motivation to run as quickly as he could in the direction of the tower. He felt a dark chakra upon awakening that appeared to be filled with anger and hatred, but it felt so familiar to him that he realized it was the same chakra that belonged to that girl. With no more time to waste, Naruto summoned his chakra to his legs and ran toward the Hokage's tower in a dead sprint. He only hoped he wouldn't arrive too late because he had no idea what the girl was capable of or whether the elderly Hokage could withstand the power of a potential Jinchuriki. The current Hokage had figured out where it was and how to get to it, but the sound of battle filled the dark room that was normally accessible to everyone. He was ecstatic as he combed through the old books and scrolls to find the one he was most interested in. He hoped it existed and that the fourth wasn't as brilliant as everyone said he was. The party had begun earlier than he had anticipated, as he was informed by a loud roar emanating from outside the village. The man's golden eyes scanned the scrolls and he thought, I should have known better then to believe that boy would be able to hold off his appetite until after the tournament. He threw the scroll he was holding into the wall and yelled, damn it, it's not here, through the air. Then he began to laugh hysterically. He looked down at an old photograph of that person who had knocked off a small desk that was sitting in the room with a single oil lamp on it. Well, fourth, it looks like you took your secret to the grave, he said. A faint smile flashed across the man's face as his pale hand reached down and picked up the photograph of the fourth Hokage's gravesite. He continued to gaze at it. Then, in a cloud of smoke, he vanished from the room with the picture, leaving behind the jumble of unopened scrolls and unwelcome jutsu research papers. Neji stood on the roof and watched as the two monstrous creatures of destruction engaged in combat. One was attempting to prevent the other from destroying the village, while the other was attempting to kill the other so that they could do so. As he saw the Sans creature begin to enclose his cousin in its own body, he grinned. Everything is going as planned, father. Even if she survives, she will be very weak and exposed, and that's when I'll attack. Neji thought, I just hope that you'll have your end taken care of and that we'll be able to rule the main branch of the Hyuga at last if Lord Orochimaru keeps his word. He then turned to face the Hokage's tower, which had a purple barrier covering its summit. As he gazed at it, a tiny smile appeared on his face. She seems to be doing her job as well, so even he won't be able to stop us from carrying out our plans, Neji thought. As he approached the Hokage's tower, Naruto ran on the village roofs, his heart pounding. He was determined to identify the person and prevent them from harming the Hokage. As these thoughts passed through his head, The beast inside of him began to awaken when he sensed the chakra emanating from the other person. He simply prayed that it wouldn't be too late. His chakra was directed towards Naruto. They dare use my chakra to fool one of their own. They will pay for this, he said. Naruto's chakra system suddenly gave him a huge boost, and he started to run faster without pausing to consider what was happening or to notice the slight changes in his features. His canine teeth had grown longer and had become fangs, his fingernails had grown out and taken on the shape of claws, his cornea had changed from bright blue to blood red, his whisker, like birthmarks, had become thicker, and his pupils had changed from round to virtual slits. He quickly found the tower and ascended it with relative ease, using his chakra to maintain a foothold. Then he saw the barrier. Jiraiya had shown him how to overcome most barriers, but he had never seen one like this. He grabbed a fragment of roof tile and hurled it at the barrier. As soon as it made contact with it, it turned to ash. Gazing at the barrier, he thought, interesting. An ear-shattering shriek was heard as the dark chakra concealed inside the barrier suddenly wrinkled. Naruto turned to face the sky and saw the chakra transform into the head of a giant fox. He exclaimed, She's the Kyuubi container. No, she is not the Kyuubi's container, she is just a pale imitation. A pseudo Jinchuriki, if you will, the Kyuubi voice in his mind said. What the hell are you, and how do you know that? Naruto thought. The voice in his mind laughed heartily. There's no point in giving away the surprise just yet if you haven't figured it out by now. You can use my power to break through that barrier without getting hurt, but it's too late now that your Hokage is dead, Kyuubi remarked. The power of the pseudo Jinchuriki and the old man's chakra both diminished, and Naruto sensed this as well. As soon as he passed the now demolished barrier, a number of Anbu guards stopped him and chained him up. Naruto fought to free himself from the restraints. Hey, what does this signify? He yelled at the Anbu. Naruto Uzumaki, you're under arrest for the murder of the third Hokage, the Anbu replied. Her chakra was dangerously low, so she had to stop this now. Shikaku, on the other hand, appeared to have used almost none of his chakra. The Seven Tails directed a beam of chakra at a wall of sand that was approaching her, turning it to glass and then shattering it to pieces. Shikaku mockingly remarked, looks like the little kitty cat has run out of energy. The sand demon's entire body turned to glass as the Seven Tails laughed and began to crackle with electricity, turning the clouds above them dark. Inside, she found the sleeping form of the boy from the other day, Gaara of the Sand, and she opened her mouth to shoot a beam of chakra at him, erasing all traces of him. She then fell to the ground, breathing heavily, and transformed back into an unconscious Hinata. When Neji saw the Seven Tails fall to the ground and transform back into his cousin's unconscious form, he couldn't help but smile. He then ran to her, took out his kunai, raised it over her heart, and started thrusting it downward. Then Neji felt the same force push him backwards and about 3 feet away from Hinata, and he looked at her somewhat bewildered and concerned. Neji pushed down on his cousin, but something stopped the kunai he was holding from penetrating her heart. He pressed down as hard as he could, but it couldn't even get through her brown coat. What the hell? He asked himself. After he activated his Byakugan, a bright flash of blue chakra caused him to become partially blind. Neji deactivated his Byakugan to prevent himself from becoming blinded by the intense light. Neji grinned and said, looks like that demon of yours likes you, Hinata. In any case, we'll just have to change the plan a little and put you in the Hyuga vault. Neji lifted Hinata off the ground and said, who knows, maybe we'll be able to harness your powers and use them for something more beneficiary to the Hyuga clan than what your soon-to-be late father did. He then excitedly made his way back to the Hyuga complex. The man with the whip had positioned himself out of Naruto's line of sight, and he grunted in pain as he felt the skin on his back being torn away from the muscle it concealed. Come on, demon child, just tell me who you're working for, and I'll let you die quietly, the voice said. I work for Konoha, I was trained by the Sannin Jiraiya, Naruto replied. The man let out a sigh, and then the room echoed with the crack of a whip and Naruto's grunts. Are you unable to think of something slightly superior to that? The voice repeated the question. Naruto, who had been hanging by his arms for what seemed like hours, heard that Suna had given up right after Gaara died, but he had not heard anything more. He breathed heavily as the burning pain shot through his body. I assure you that I am not a spy, I did not murder the third, he yelled. The whip cracked again, and this time Naruto was hit so hard that he was unable to contain his scream. I must thank you, Naruto. Your stubbornness is something I haven't experienced in a very long time. It's like sweet music to my ears. The voice said in a blissful tone, it's both intoxicating and satisfying to know that I'll soon be allowed to use other means to get the answers I seek from you. With his eyes blinded by the tears that had escaped from the agony of the last whipping he had received, Naruto breathed heavily, his body drenched in perspiration. "Please, stop, I'm not a spy," Naruto begged. Naruto screamed in agony as he felt his blood trickle down the side of his back in thick streams, followed by another crack from the whip and the sound of something wet splattering against the floor. As the voice said, "Ah, there we go, pay dirt," two icy fingers brushed against Naruto's back, removing a trickle of blood. The voice said, "Your blood tastes good, Naruto, I'm really going to enjoy this," as more blood hit the ground and the whip cracked. As he hung by his wrists, Naruto felt tears running down his cheeks. He was thinking about Hinata and whether or not she was okay or if her transformation into the Seven Tails had had any negative consequences. There was another crack of the whip, and more of Naruto's blood spilled onto the ground. "Oh, and if you're wondering about your little partner who quote saved the village end quote, she's fine. But you demons don't care about anybody but yourselves, so that probably doesn't really matter to you," the voice said. After letting out another cry of agony, Naruto began to breathe heavily and felt the Kyuubi's chakra begin to flow from him, healing his wounds until he felt a piece of paper against his forehead. "Oh no, you won't be calling upon your other chakra, we want you to experience every painful sensation," the voice said. With anger on his face, Jiraiya slammed the doors leading to the council chambers. "What is this supposed to mean?" he called out to the council. "What is the meaning of this, Lord Jiraiya?" an old woman asked. "You are well aware of the main point of this," once more, Jiraiya yelled. "If you're referring to the matter of the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, it is being handled by one of our best masters of torture," the woman continued. "Are you insane, Ibiki? It won't be more than an hour, poor boy." Once more, Jiraiya yelled. "That's good, then the sooner he cracks, the sooner we'll get our information as to who he's really working for," said the elderly lady. "You fools. You don't realize that Naruto's mind is extremely fragile at the moment. He has recently suffered a significant loss, and Ibiki may cause him to lose it. He might end up looking like Shikaku Jinchuriki, with the exception of the Shikaku who was defeated by the Seven Tails. There would be no stopping Naruto, you foolish, naive boobs. He would become practically unstoppable," Jiraiya yelled. "Yes, this will be noted, Jiraiya. Now on to something more important. We want you to search for Tsunade so that she can take the post of Hokage," the elderly lady replied. When Jiraiya heard these words, a smile appeared on his face. "As the council desires, but could I please make a request?" Jiraiya inquired. "If it's about the Kyuubi boy, then it's denied. He is a prisoner until further notice," said the elderly lady. "Oh no, it's not about Naruto. I want to bring Hinata with me," replied Jiraiya. Ibiki applied thumbscrews to Naruto's arms, legs, and sides of his head, causing him to wince as he hung there covered in blood and sweat. His body felt weak and heavy, and his mind was so strained that he wasn't sure if he could last much longer. As he attached wire to the thumbscrew ends, Ibiki remarked, "You know, Naruto, it's been a while since I've had the opportunity to use this method of torture." He let out a roar of pain as he felt the Kyuubi's chakra begin to take hold of him again, only to feel it pushed back into the paper seal that Ibiki had previously used. Naruto's eyes shook with fear as the adrenaline shot through his system and he started to try to break the chains that held him. He was rewarded for his efforts by receiving a painful jolt of electricity through his system. "Naruto, have you had enough?" he inquired. Naruto said in a whisper, "Please let me go, I didn't attack the Hokage." His voice reverberated throughout the room as he cried out in agony, receiving another shock of electricity through his system. Weeping, "Please let me go," he said. "We apologize to Jiraiya, but Hinata Hyuga has passed away," said Hisashi, speaking on behalf of the council. He was sitting in the exact seat his brother had taken to represent the Hyuga clan, and Jiraiya looked up at him in shock that he hadn't even noticed. "What do you mean Hinata is dead? Where is Hisashi? Why is he not there?" replied Jiraiya. A silent tear slipped from Hisashi's cheek and he dropped his eyes to the ground. "According to Hisashi, my brother Hisashi Hyuga was killed today, Lord Jiraiya," she said in a low voice. When Jiraiya heard these words, his face flushed. He questioned, "What about the mother?" Hisashi gave Jiraiya a nearly joyful glance. "Lady Hyuga is fine, but with the loss of Hisashi she asked me to take her place here on the council," replied Hisashi. Knowing that Naruto would still have a mother if he survived the tortures Ibiki had planned for him with his mind intact, Jiraiya sighed somewhat relieved. Then Jiraiya turned to the council with a thought. "Since we have no Hokage, and seeing as how the council only has limited powers even when we don't have a Hokage, I would like to remind you that you cannot approve any tortures, deaths, or anything of the sort with prisoners until a new Hokage can be found. So with that I request that Naruto be removed from the room that Ibiki is currently torturing him in, and to be placed in a Konoha maximum security prison cell. Until the new Hokage has been inaugurated, Jiraiya responded. After a long period of silence, one of the elder council members got up and looked down at Jiraiya before turning to face the other council members. He's right, we have no choice, but to honor his request and move the Kyuubi Jinchuriki to a maximum security cell. Until he returns with the new Hokage. The elder replied and then returned to his seat. When Jiraiya heard this, he grinned and hoped that it wasn't too late and that Ibiki hadn't changed Naruto so much that he would lose himself. Naruto hung there on the heavy chains, his skin blackened and burned, his breathing labored and heavy, and he wanted to cry. His head, like the rest of his body, hung low on his shoulders and seemed to be made of lead. He could hear people talking, and a huge sense of betrayal was roiling inside his head. Naruto felt a firm hand grab his chin and raise his head as the room's door opened and slammed shut. Ibiki looked less than pleased to see Naruto, and he found himself staring into his icy eyes. Consider yourself lucky, demon. The council has decided to suspend your interrogation. That is until the new Hokage grants me permission to start it up again. Ibiki grinned broadly. Naruto felt Ibiki's hand slide away from his chin as he gazed at him, feeling a little relieved that his torment would be put on hold for a bit. As he hung there, Naruto wondered why he had been subjected to this ordeal. Why did Jiraiya allow this to occur? How come he didn't stop this? Naruto felt deceived by both his master and the village he had heard so much about, which he had been told was noble and beautiful. Jiraiya informed him that everything was accepted in the village. Had Jiraiya told him about this village before? Naruto's mind was empty, his body was heavy, and he felt deceived by everyone. He had lost all faith in Jiraiya and this village. A tiny voice began to murmur in his mind as he hung there, and all that was left was an empty shell. They said, Naruto. Naruto. Naruto's eyes were cold and emotionless as he stared at the floor, ignoring the voice in his head. Naruto, I know how you feel. You feel betrayed, you feel left down, you feel like you can't trust anyone, the voice continued. Tears suddenly welled up in Naruto's eyes and started to spill onto the torture chamber floor. All he could manage to say was, why? Yes. The voice asked, do you want to exact revenge on these people who wronged you? After what felt like hours of staring at the floor, Naruto raised his head and fixed his enraged gaze on the door. As he continued to stare at the door, a single word reverberated throughout the deserted torture chamber. Yes. There was no sound this evening, and the air was crisp and cool. Without giving much thought to the atrocities the village council had unleashed in the torture chambers beneath the village, everyone in Konoha slept soundly in their beds. The perimeter of the village gate was patrolled by guards. At shift changes, they may knock on each other's doors or chat with former teammates and friends about their carefree and youthful years. By throwing a little party, the council members all congratulated themselves on successfully putting the Kyuubi brat in the dungeons. They raised their glasses to toast themselves and congratulated one another on what they believed to be their greatest accomplishment since the Kyuubi was sealed away. Neji's white, seemingly lifeless eyes gazed down at the unconscious girl in front of him, and as excitement filled his body, his heart pounded and raced. His father was in charge, his uncle and cousin were assumed dead, the coup was a total success, and Naruto was imprisoned for killing the third Hokage. Everything was fine. All he could hope for now was that Naruto would be dead by the time the fourth Hokage was discovered. As he ran his hand through Hinata's dark hair, a dark, icy smile formed on his lips. The room he was in was lit by a few tiny candles. The small wooden door, which was adorned with numerous seals and explosive tags, was the only way out of the eerie red glow cast by the light on the stone walls, indicating that this room was only accessible by him and his father. He said to himself, soon Naruto, soon I will have everything I've ever wanted, as he bent over and planted a kiss on Hinata's lips. A low hissing sound was heard as Naruto's physical wounds started to heal as he gazed at the dark cell, his eyes stinging from the tears that were streaming out of them. He muttered, I want them dead, into the shadows. I want them all dead, he repeated, his eyes welling with tears. As calmly as if it were talking about the weather, the voice in his head said, I will slaughter them all for you. I will make them pay for what they have done to you, Naruto. Just let me out, let me kill them for you. All right, I'll let you out, but please don't hurt Hinata, or her father, or mother, Naruto replied. The voice said, I assure you that neither your partner nor her parents will suffer any harm. Naruto closed his eyes, grinned, and felt the dark red chakra begin to take control of his body as his head went limp against his chest. His mind was now shut off from the outside world, and all he could think about was anger, hatred, and revenge. His body began to feel as though it was on fire, His goal was to destroy Konoha. No one would live, and everyone would perish. Whatever it was that Ibiki used to drain his chakra from him the last time, he would wipe them all out. The chakra started to envelop his body as it burned through the chains, and he could feel it growing more intense as it was drawn from his body. Naruto vanished in an instant, leaving behind a red chakra covered creature with 4 tails as the chakra erupted out of his body like a raging fire. With a roar of fury, the fox-like creature slashed the room's door to splinters with its chakra claw. When an alarm was set off, there was a loud whistling sound. The fox became enraged and blasted a beam of pure chakra through the stone wall across from him. The building surrounding him began to tremble and rumble loudly, and he could hear shouts from men and women running through the underground compound where he was being held, as well as the sound of sandals hitting the floor. After staring straight up at the ceiling, the creature started to gather chakra in its stomach before shooting another chakra beam into the ceiling. The beam continued through the roof, the ground, and the rocks until it broke the surface, at which point it leapt powerfully through the hole. His glowing red eyes illuminated the darkness of the tunnel as he continued to climb the newly created tunnel, and the sounds soon subsided as it made its way through the ground. The chakra covering his body hissed as his body touched the ground. The creature grinned toothily as he opened his jaws and let steam escape from his mouth as the heat from inside blended with the cool night air. When he emerged, the sounds of terror-filled screams filled his ears like a lovely symphony. As the Kyuubi had his second coming, the cries of the populace reverberated throughout the village. This time, the 4th Hokage would not be able to stop him or imprison him. He then noticed a small girl who seemed to be homeless. The creature inhaled deeply, sensing the terror emanating from her small frame. Then he lifted his chakra claws and killed her with a single blow. After making a kill, he roared with joy and fled into the village. As he killed them one by one, the air was filled with the sounds of women's screams and frightened cries. The village ninjas tried everything they could to keep the beast in check, but it was all in vain because the beast's overwhelming chakra made their jutsu useless. After 4 of the village's biggest buildings were destroyed by a red beam of chakra, there was a loud explosion. The Kyuubi then turned his attention to the Hokage's office, the village's largest structure. He flew at a speed that was impossible for a regular person to follow, and in a matter of seconds, he was in front of the enormous red building with the fire symbol displayed on a big sign. His body began ejecting tiny orbs of chakra, and when he had enough, he caused them to all combine into a single, enormous ball. His glowing red eyes appeared to gleam with rage. Subsequently, he swallowed the tiny golf ball-sized orb, which caused his body to enlarge and resemble a huge ball. He then opened his mouth and ejected the large ball of chakra, which vaporized the building. As he began to attack more of the now running villagers, the Kyuubi let out a roar of delight as he saw the building turn to dust in the wind. His roars reverberated throughout the atmosphere. It made no difference if they were men, women, or children. The Kyuubi vaporized, bitten, or chopped them all down. From the safety of the secret caverns behind Hokage's mountain, the village council observed all of this carnage. They heard the cries of the defenseless villagers as the beast ravaged them. One of the council members muttered, "What have we done? What have we done?" He heard from his various sources and the people he questioned as he traveled through the different towns that were close to Tsunade. Jiraiya made his way through a dense forest of overgrown trees and shrubs. He simply prayed that they would return in time and that the information he was given was correct. "Please, Naruto, don't give in just yet. Don't let the beast out," he thought as he made his way through the dense forest. He knew that he had to find Tsunade before he could return, or else those bastards on the council would have him killed or transformed into the weapon they wanted him to be once he obtained the Kyuubi. However, he still felt as though he was needed in the village for some reason. However, he was more concerned with the consequences of Naruto cracking than he was with that. Having witnessed Naruto's anger before, he was aware of the danger it posed, particularly when he allowed the Kyuubi's chakra to control him. He prayed, "Please God, don't let me be too late," as he continued to move through the forest. When Jiraiya finally reached the next town after walking through the forest, he grinned to himself as he heard a loud roar of rage, a crashing sound, and then the sound of a man screaming as Hugh flew through the air. As he made his way to the building where the man flew through the air, Jiraiya thought, "Well, it appears that you haven't changed, Tsunade." He grinned upon seeing a woman who appeared to be in her 20s. Her green robes bore the sucker symbol on the back, and her brown eyes gazed angrily at a broken man. "Well, Tsunade, it's good to see you haven't lost your touch," Jiraiya chuckled. As soon as Tsunade heard his voice, her head jerked up. She joyfully walked out to meet him and said, Jiraiya? What are you doing here?" When Jiraiya noticed the black-haired woman holding Tsunade's pet pig ton, Ton. He smiled and laughed. She always accompanied Tsunade with a shy expression on her face. Shizune exclaimed, Master Jiraiya, it's so nice to see you. Jiraiya calmly remarked, and as always it's nice to see the both of you, before focusing on Tsunade. Tsunade asks, what's wrong, Jiraiya? Jiraiya, playing Tsunade, declared, Naruto's been condemned to die, for the murder of the third Hokage, and Shizune's expressions were one of complete shock. Now, don't go jumping to conclusions, Naruto is innocent. Orochimaru is the one who killed him, but he made it look like Naruto did it using the Kyuubi's chakra, Jiraiya thundered. Tsunade questioned, but how could he have done that? I don't know, but what I do know is the village needs a new Hokage, Jiraiya replied. When Tsunade said, then you should take the job. No, I'm not suited for the job, I'm more useful for gathering information, but you on the other hand would be perfect for the job, Jiraiya replied. Tsunade looked at him in silence for a while Shizune grinned broadly at Jiraiya's remarks. Tsunade questioned, was this the council's decision? Yes, Jiraiya replied, we must now return quickly. For Naruto's sake and the village's, he muttered. They tried their best to contain the beast, but they weren't doing very well as the Kyuubi roared and tore through a root. Anbu. They had never faced anything like the power of the Kyuubi. The Kyuubi's glowing red eyes continued to stare down the countless ninjas that surrounded him as he roared, making many of them jump back in fear. Then, he opened his mouth and threw beams of chakra at the ninjas, evaporating everyone it touched. The air was filled with black smoke and the stench of their scalded, burned carcasses. The Kyuubi's dreadful roar rocked Konoha as the remaining ninjas fled for their lives and he flew in search of fresh victims. After receiving word from the village council that the Kyuubi had escaped, Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Shizune fled through the woods. As they sped through the trees, Jiraiya yelled, I warned them, what would happen if they tortured him? I know Jiraiya, I know, but the important thing now is to stop Naruto before he destroys the village, and everyone in it. Tsunade replied. As the village soon came into view, they kept running through the trees. Their senses were filled with chakra, the smell of burnt corpses, and the glow of flames. Fear also filled their senses. As the morning sun rose blood red, Neji and his father gazed at the destruction and carnage the Kyuubi had left behind. They all watched in horror as the monster tore a man in two with his bare hands, or claws, as they now looked, as if to indicate that blood had been spilled the night before. Such raw power, imagine what you will be like when we've transferred the power from Hinata into you, Neji, Hisashi said. Yes father, then I shall be the most powerful ninja in all of Konoha, because once this is all over the new Hokage will want Naruto destroyed as soon as possible. In doing so also destroy the Kyuubi that dwells inside him, or they'll simply remove the Kyuubi until they can find a new host, in which case, I just might make the sacrifice for the good of the village. Neji said the final word as if he were a brave warrior. As they watched the village and its inhabitants die and be destroyed, Hisashi grinned and wrapped his arms around his son's shoulders. As he ran through the village, the Kyuubi smelled something familiar, not the one he had hoped to kill, but the other one. The person who had taught the man he detested and wanted to murder. 2 other people were with the vessel when he was training to kill the human who smelled of snakes and death, and he could also smell their familiar scents. As he continued to race through the village, he killed the various ninjas and summoned beasts that stood in his way, and a cruel, evil smile seemed to appear on his face. He was going to kill Jiraiya, the 4th Hokage's teacher, and his demonic red eyes were only focused on that location. Jiraiya gazed at the creature as it approached him more closely, the Kyuubi's blood-red glowing eyes gazing back into his own. Jiraiya replied, Ah Kyuubi, I was hoping that I wouldn't be seeing you again, as if you were speaking to an old friend. As it attempted to stare down the teacher of the man who had imprisoned him inside this disgusting human body, the Kyuubi could only scream in anger. Jiraiya's attitude toward the toad sage did not change despite the smile that had formed on his lips. With the same unfazed tone, Jiraiya said, I see that you still hold a grudge against me, but I must ask you to return to the seal, and allow Naruto to regain control of his body. Like a lion circling its prey, the Kyuubi began to circle him, Tsunade, and Shizune in search of an opportunity to attack. Despite his outward appearance, Jiraiya's heart was pounding almost painfully in his chest as he clutched a small square piece of paper in his palm. Would he be able to finish it in time, or would the creature have another victim to add to the blood that had already stained Naruto's defenseless hands? The creature stopped right in front of Jiraiya, sniffing the air as though he could smell the fear radiating from him. It seems that you are not talkative, Kyuubi. Very well then, let's do this, Jiraiya said. A flash of red occurred, and Jiraiya stood in front of them with his arm outstretched and his palm flat against the Kyuubi's forehead. Tsunade and Shizune were both frozen in a defensive stance. The chakra that covered his body then began to recede back into the seal that held most of it back, and the creature fell to the ground. Now that Naruto was lying in front of the three of them, the skies that had been darkened by the dense smoke clouds produced by the burning buildings appeared to clear, as though it were a metaphor for the darkness that was dispelling inside Naruto's own head. Then he looked up, his blue eyes watering, while Shizune, Tsunade, and Jiraiya gazed down at him. They all had a look of relief and sadness instead of hatred for the child. They knew that Naruto was innocent during the outburst, but it would not sit well with the Konoha residents. With a warm grin on his face, Jiraiya knelt down to embrace Naruto, letting the boy sob against his shoulder as he did so. Speaking to the man who had been like a father to him, Naruto choked his voice and said, "I'm so sorry, master. I did so much wrong, and shamed you." "It's all right, son, it's all over now, you haven't brought me any shame. I am the one who should apologize, for not getting you out of there before it came to this," Jiraiya replied. As they stood up, Naruto's eyes were puffy and red from the tears he had shed, and his heart ached as he saw the people the Kyuubi had killed in his mind's eye. It was as though someone had played a tape recording of everything that had happened in the previous few hours. How would Hinata perceive him? After what he had just done, would her parents let him return to the Hyuga complex? As Naruto's mind flashed back to the image of the little girl's bloody, mangled body, a new wave of tears left his eyes. His mind seemed to be stuck on that image, and he felt himself getting sick. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air and choking. Uncertain of how to reassure the child that everything would be okay, Tsunade knelt next to him and gave him a back rub. No amount of anything could ever make this okay. With white eyes, Neji opened the Hyuga complex's sealed door and gazed at the village's devastation at the hands of the Kyuubi. He saw the raw power that the Kyuubi had unleashed without even approaching its full potential, and a dark smile formed on his lips. He then started to question whether he would be able to control the seven tails that were imprisoned inside Hinata and what kind of power they possessed. He said, "I must have that power," as he made his way back into the complex and then descended into the sealed vault containing the unconscious Hinata. Neji asked one of the men tasked with watching over his sleeping cousin, "Has she tried to regain consciousness yet?" "No, sir, it appears that the battle between her and the Shikaku Jinchuriki took a lot out of her. The demon inside her is attempting to heal her body, but its power too seems to be greatly diminished," the guard replied. "Good, keep me informed of her condition. I want a report every half hour. I want to know of any changes, even if it's something minor, like she sneezed," Neji said, and the guard nodded his head. Neji moved from the part of the vault where Hinata was kept to another area that was crammed with old scrolls, many of which had been sealed with strong jutsu to prevent their contents from ever being read. Once Neji had located the scroll he was looking for, he sat down at a table in the center of the room, broke the seal on it, and started reading its contents. His smile got bigger and bigger with each line as he read through the many scrolls that filled the room, some of which were covered in layers of dust. As he strolled through the demolished village, Yurjia's heart ached from looking at all the dead and homeless people that were all over the streets. All that was left of many of the buildings that lined the streets were the shattered foundations and traces of smoke. As he crossed the debris and headed toward the remnants of the Hokage's tower, he could hear children's cries. The once proud building's wall was now entirely destroyed. A man who appeared to be at his wit's end ran towards him as he was approaching it, his eyes brimming with rage as he gazed at Jiraiya. The village elder yelled, You caused all of this. You left that monster into this village." As the village elder approached Jiraiya more and more, Jiraiya stood there laughing as he heard his yells. "It was your own fault, Yakan. I warned you what would happen when Naruto's anger is unleashed. It is your own fault, and because of your decision the village now has to suffer for it," Jiraiya replied. As Yurjia's words pierced him like a knife, Yakan gazed at him. "I don't care, that does not change the fact that you brought that monster into this village knowing that he was a danger to those around him," replied Yakan. "Naruto is not a monster, and he is not a danger to anyone as long as he isn't treated like you treated him, and as Hokage of this village, I absolve him of all responsibility, and place it all upon the person who had ordered him to be tortured without a Hokage present," Tsunade said as she approached Jiraiya. As Tsunade's words seemed to reverberate in his ears, Yakan gazed at her with a mixture of shock and fear. "But I am not to blame, Lady Tsunade, it was Jiraiya who. You are to blame, Yakan, and as Hokage I sentence you to helping repair every single building in this village starting with the Hokage's tower. You will build it brick by brick," Tsunade replied. "Why? Yes, Lady Tsunade." Yakan bowed to Tsunade while gritting his teeth. "Very nice, Tsunade," Jiraiya remarked, grinning. Tsunade said, "Why thank you," in a phony sweet voice. As Naruto laid waste to the village below, a girl on top of Hokage's mountain gazed down at the carnage that was starting to happen with brown eyes. She had to be the one to soothe the wounded spirit that now filled Naruto's being because of the cries and explosions that came from the village. The girl sobbed into the mask covering her face. "Oh Naruto, look at what they've done to you. You who would never hurt a soul if you could avoid it, are now forced to kill thousands of people. All for their stupid insatiable appetite for revenge. Naruto, please don't let this affect you more than what has already happened to you." She remained there for a little while longer than was necessary before she had to move aside as the fourth Hokage's face was completely destroyed by one of the Kyuubi's energy blasts. Knowing that she was only postponing the inevitable, she stood there gazing at the devastation as the mountain trembled and threatened to topple. She continued to stare for a little while longer before vanishing in a flurry of leaves. Orochimaru grinned as he gazed at the swirling red glowing mass inside a glass vial with hungry yellow eyes in his candlelit laboratory. He longed to be able to take the swirling mass into his own body someday, but he would require a lot more than that. Orochimaru pricked his finger and added his blood to the swirling mass in the vial, saying, "Oh Naruto, how I long to possess what you have, to be the most powerful ninja on this planet. Of course I need not only your power, but also the power of the other Jinchuriki, before the Akatsuki can get their hands on them. Once I have gained the powers of all the Jinchuriki I will bring this world to its knees, and then I shall learn its secrets, and then I shall be the most powerful ninja on this planet and all will become subjects for my experiments," said the crazed Snake Sanin. Naruto longed to see Hinata and the rest of the family, except for Neji, as he traveled down the lengthy dirt road. He exhaled in relief upon realizing that the Kyuubi had not damaged the Hyuga complex during its rampage. However, the guards did not extend a cordial welcome to him when he arrived at the gates. "You are no longer welcome here, beast, by order of the new head of the Hyuga clan, Hizashi," the guard replied. Fear seized Naruto as he asked, "What do you mean, new head of the Hyuga clan? Hinata wasn't killed, was she? Where is Lady Hyuga?" "They're all dead. The attack from the one tail caused Hinata to use up all of her strength. Her heart stopped beating from the exertion. Her sister and parents were killed trying to escape from the attack. Hizashi and Neji were the only ones that survived, and your recent attack has forced them to ban you from the complex, as they don't want to be associated with a monster," stated the guard. When the salty water hit the parched ground, which thirstily drank it down, Naruto's heart broke and he fell to his knees as tears filled his eyes. The guard said, "I'm sorry, Naruto," and Naruto stood up and walked away. He walked down the streets as night fell on Konoha and thought, "I lost Hinata, just like I lost Isaribi. It happened again." He felt empty and alone, and the darkness that descended upon the village mirrored the darkness that now filled his heart. He brought this upon them, the only family he had ever had, and now they were gone, and it was all his fault. He would never see Lady Hyuga's maternal kindness, hear Hiashi's fatherly counsel, or experience Hinata's unwavering love. There was nothing that could restore everything that he had lost. With the moon as the only source of light in the destroyed village, he strolled slowly through the streets, feeling empty and as though his life had lost all purpose. He just needed to get away from everyone and everything, but he had no idea where he was heading. Before long, he was in the Konoha forest, where the leaves had almost entirely obscured the moonlight. He soon became aware of how extremely thirsty he was when he heard the sound of rushing water. It was challenging for him to move through the forest because of the dense brush and the roots that covered the ground. He quickly grew weary of it and leapt onto the tree branches, hopping from one to the next until he came across a tiny creek. His face and lips were drenched from the rushing water as he knelt down and started drinking. He sat on the bank and gazed at the water, which reflected the crescent moon and the few leaves that were able to find their way through. The moon appeared to be smiling, so his mind positioned Hinata's face in the moon's place, turning her smile into the moon. He gazed up at the picture his mind had conjured up, tears welling up in his eyes. He said, "Hinata, I'm so sorry," before he passed out and went to sleep. A pair of eyes watched Naruto sleep, and when they heard him call out another girl's voice, they started crying. Her heart pounded quickly in her chest as they alternated between red and brown. She removed her mask to reveal her black hair, which had been concealed by the cloth that had been wrapped around her entire head. Her tanned skin revealed no scars or imperfections, and her brown, tear-filled eyes gazed at Naruto as her hidden face emerged in the faint moonlight. Desiring to feel his warm embrace and his warm lips against hers, as well as to be with him once more. After standing there for a little while longer, she put on the mask that had concealed her face from the outside world and disappeared as the sun rose. Tsunade gazed at the forest, her brown eyes searching its perimeter for Naruto. She had witnessed him enter, but had not yet seen him emerge. She was still overcome with worry, but she was unable to go look for him. Now that she was in charge of a whole village, she was unable to prioritize her responsibilities over her feelings. Another chakra signature entered the room as she stood there gazing out the Hokage's tower's broken window. Tsunade turned around and saw the girl who had killed the first Hokage. She recognized the chakra signature right away, and a tiny smile appeared on her lips. Gazing into the girl's crimson eyes, she questioned, "So are you going to kill me too?" "No, I'm only here under orders of Lord Orochimaru to give you a warning," replied the child. Tsunade calmly asked, "Oh, and what would this warning be?" as though speaking to an old friend. "Either join forces with the Hidden Sound Village, or we will attack again, and this time my powers won't be fully unleashed, and the Kyuubi will return to destroy this village," said the child. "Would you really do that to the village that the man you love still lives in?" replied Tsunade. "He is already being dealt with as we speak, Lady Tsunade," replied the child. "What do you think Orochimaru plans to do with him? Because it certainly won't be very pleasant for Naruto. Actually knowing Orochimaru, the process will most likely be fatal," Tsunade replied. The girl said, "I pray that you are wrong, Lady Tsunade, but now that I have given you the warning, I must return to Lord Orochimaru's side and inform him," before vanishing in a tornado of leaves. With a tear in her brown eyes, Tsunade turned away from the girl's position and returned to the forest. Tsunade said in a low voice, "Damn you, Orochimaru, of all the people you could have taken, why did it have to be her?" As the sun started to set behind the mountain, she kept her gaze fixed on the trees. She wanted to send someone out to find Naruto, but more than half of the ninjas were on missions. All she could hope for was that Naruto was having dinner with Hinata at the Hyuga mansion. "What will you do when you find out, Naruto?" As darkness descended on the village, she pondered. With a sigh, she left the tower and headed through the village, her heart pounding because she had to know. She hurried to the Hyuga mansion because she couldn't wait for Naruto to report in for missions tomorrow, and she needed to make sure he was safe. When she arrived, she discovered that 2 members of the Hyuga main house were watching the front of the mansion. As she approached the Hyugas, she thought, "That's odd." She made the statement, "I would like to speak with Naruto," while facing the Hyuga guards. The guard to her left said, "We apologize, Lady Hokage, but Naruto is not present." Tsunade inquired, "Do you know when he will return?" after spotting something strange. The guard to her right stated, "The head of the Hyuga house has ordered that he not return, Lady Hokage." Tsunade balled her hands into the deadly fists for which she was famous and yelled, "What do you mean he's now allowed to return? Let me speak to Hiashi at once. This is an outrage." "We can't do that, Lady Hokage. We are under strict orders that he is not to be disturbed. His daughter has fallen very ill, and is not allowed visitors," the guard responded. Tsunade asked, trying her hardest not to knock their heads off their shoulders, "Are you disobeying a direct order from the Hokage?" The guard to her left rushed into the mansion and said, Not at all, Lady Hokage. Page, please wait right here while I go and fetch Lord Hisashi. I mean Hiashi." Lord Hisashi. For what reason would he choose Hisashi? Tsunade thought. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but something seemed off when Hiashi walked through the doorway, quickly jolting her out of her reverie. Although she hadn't seen the man in a few years, people didn't really change. Especially when they were married to someone like Hyoma. Hiashi said, "Lady Tsunade, to what do I owe the pleasure?" "I was wondering why Naruto was no longer welcome in your home," Tsunade replied. "It seems that the guard mistook my orders. I told him that Naruto was not to come into my home, because my daughter is sick and I didn't want him to get sick as well, and she did not want him to get sick as well. Nor did Hinata want him to see her in her weakened condition. I have arranged an apartment for him to stay in until she is well again," Hiashi explained as she handed her the key to him. Tsunade said, "Oh, okay, thank you, I'll make sure he gets it," although she was still a little uncomfortable about the situation. She made the decision to give up and left the Hyuga mansion after saying good night to Hiashi. As she was walking down the streets, she turned around and heard Hiashi's irate voice behind the Hyuga mansion. "You idiot, you almost blew it. As of tonight, you are no longer main house members, and will thusly be given the brand. Hope you survive it," Hiashi's voice said. This was the final nail in the coffin. Tsunade knew that this couldn't be the Hiashi she remembered, especially since she knew Hyoma would undermine him. But who was this imposter? Orochimaru's almost imperceptible lips curled into a ruthless grin as his best creation since the curse mark materialized behind him. Orochimaru said, "Ah, you're back. Tell me how Naruto is doing." "He seems depressed about something, possibly the fact that he's killed so many people," the child replied. Orochimaru's smile never left his lips as he said, "Great, then everything is going as planned. Soon it will be time for you to reveal yourself to him." "Yes, master. Then we will have the power we need to take down the Akatsuki, even if they've gotten 3 of the Biju already," Even combined won't be enough to stop you, replied the child. Exactly, after infusing you with the Biju's power and seeing how much you've improved in both strength and power, makes me wonder just how powerful I will become when I am the new vessel of the Kyuubi, Orochimaru replied. The girl said, yes Lord Orochimaru, will Naruto survive the procedure? If my calculations are correct, my procedure should leave him alive and well, -1 fox demon of course, after that he'll be yours to do with as you wish, Orochimaru said. The girl said, thank you my lord, and turned to leave him. The words, think nothing of it child, were spoken by Orochimaru. The girl made her way through a tangle of passageways, occasionally turning as she went through the shadowy hallways of the hiding place. She quickly arrived at her room, which had a mirror vanity next to the door and a single bed. After settling into the chair, she removed her mask. The girl then discovered that she was gazing at Isaribi's reflection in the mirror. Naruto gazed down into the flowing creek's waters with blue, blood-shot eyes. He had woken up before dawn, but he had remained in the same place where he had spent the night before. His face was red and smeared from the tears streaming down his cheeks, and his body felt hollow. Pictures of his entire relationship with Hinata, including their first fight, the time he rescued her from Mizuki in the forest, and all of the grueling training her mother had subjected them to. Her lovely pale face and her lavender eyes, which were so vibrant and passionate, were still visible to him. All of that was gone, but he could still feel his heart beating the day she gave him that tender kiss. For as long as he lived, Hinata Hyuga would only be remembered, and he vowed to never forget it. The strong chakra signatures that had approached the clearing where Naruto was sitting went unnoticed because he was so engrossed in his memories. Three figures grinned at each other, hardly believing that the person they had been sent to capture was sitting there, pulling a flute from under the folds of her gray robes. A girl with dark red hair felt her lips curl into a grin. Then she started to play a tune that reverberated throughout the woods. She then started to pour chakra into the flute, giving the notes jutsu-like power. Although Naruto's ears detected the music, his body had lost feeling, and his mind was unable to recognize that something was amiss. His senses were dulled, as though he had been drugged or drunk. Rainbow waves had begun to emerge from the light that filtered through the tree's verdant leaves. Two of the three ninjas move in on him as he sits there. He swiftly binds the bewildered Naruto as a big, plump one with red hair patches emerges from the trees holding a rope cord. Naruto's feet were swiftly bound by his partner, a slimmer man with dark hair. As the two seized Naruto and started to carry his now conscious body in her direction, the girl kept singing. The girl said, excellent, as she ceased playing her flute. The fat man questioned, why does Lord Orochimaru want this runt? The girl responded, it is not our place to question, just to follow orders, as she carried Naruto's body as effortlessly as if he were a couch. A third man emerged from the trees. He had light gray hair, pale skin similar to the girl's, and purple eyes that surveyed the three. He began to breathe heavily as he looked up at the red-haired man after removing a large barrel from his back and placing it on the ground. You will be carrying him back, was the only thing the gray-haired man could say. The red-haired man smirked as he tossed the unconscious body into the barrel with ease, and they used paper seals to close the lid. Now that Naruto was securely inside, the four of them quickly fled in various directions to avoid being easily discovered or pursued. After they had ventured far beyond Konoha's boundaries and into the depths of hidden sound, they finally met up. Orochimaru pored over the stolen scroll, memorizing every diagram as his narrowed eyes darted from line to line, reading over every word. His shallow, low breathing suggested that the spell the parchment may have had on the snake Sannin might be broken if he breathed too deeply. As he continued to learn everything he could from the scroll, the pale man reflected, "O Minato Namikaze, you were a brilliance man, a shame that I never got the chance to pick your brain." He rolled the scroll up, sealed it inside another, and put it inside a secret vault behind a bookshelf. Once he was positive he had read it cover to cover and had absorbed all the information concealed within. The girl with the flute emerged behind the leaf robe, who was making a loud puff noise. With a gentle smile on his snake-like face, Orochimaru said, "Atayuya, you have returned earlier than I had expected. I take it the boy did not put up much of a fight then?" Tayuya responded in a tone that was almost military. "Yes, Lord Orochimaru. The mission went without a hitch. He fell for the notes of the melody you created for me, just as you had anticipated." Orochimaru said with confidence, "Great, get him ready for the transfer. He would soon surpass all other Jinchuriki in the known ninja world in power." Orochimaru's lips curled into a ruthless smile as Isaribi emerged from the shadows, and the female ninja nodded before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. Orochimaru said, almost gleefully, "Ah, so you heard then?" Isaribi responded, "Yes, Lord Orochimaru, I just hope that he'll be receptive to the mental reconditioning, with her brown eyes displaying intense worry for her ex-lover. Orochimaru continued to smile as he said, given how easily he was influenced by Ryuya's flute, I believe the brainwashing should be more than effective. Isaribi gave a nod before vanishing into a cloud of smoke, leaving Orochimaru by himself in his study. The room was small, round, and lit by a few candles that cast a spooky orange glow on the stone walls. A sizable bookcase with scrolls and books of all ages and qualities stood to the left of the wooden door. Orochimaru was seated in front of a single wooden desk with 2 drawers on either side. Another sizable bookcase with numerous scrolls, many of which had various seals indicating that they came from various secret villages, was positioned to the right of the room. Then Orochimaru got up and walked across the hard stone floor, clapping his sandals as he went. He opened the door and shut it behind him. He discovered himself in a hallway that was illuminated by the same type of candles that lighted his study. The floor and walls were both made of the same drab stone, and the lighting gave the snake-faced Sanine's spooky appearance as he moved down the hallway. His pale lips never left the smile they had curled into, and he would soon be the most formidable ninja in the world. The voice said, "Kitten, wake up kitten," as though it were coming from inside Hinata's head. As the young kunoichi sat up straight, her eyes slowly opened and her nostrils filled with a musty, damp smell. Her lavender pupilless gazed around the dimly lit hallways, which she had grown accustomed to seeing. As Hinata stood up, she could hear the sounds of water sloshing around her, but her clothes were completely dry. As though some unknown force were guiding her in the right direction, the Hyuga heiress began to move down the lengthy hallways and winding corridors. In no time at all, the adolescent girl was standing in a room big enough to transport an entire city. Her lavender eyes fixed themselves on the well-known image of a monolithic cage with bars as thick as a city block. There was a crease in the middle of this, and in the dead center of it was a big piece of paper with the word seal written in kanji. Hinata inquired, "What's going on, Matabi?" "Something is wrong, Hinata. For now all I can tell you is that your body is weakened from your exertion, but you need to wake up. I have healed you enough that you should be able to move around, albeit a bit stiffly. Your family is in danger, and the one you call Neji may be trying to extract me from you," the 7 Tails replied. "But I am so comfortable, I would like to just continue to sleep," Hinata replied. "Hinata awaken!" the cat exclaimed. As Hinata's consciousness was compelled to leave the seal room, her eyes exploded open, gradually adjusting to the dimness of the room in which she was being held. She tried to sit up, but her arms, legs, and torso were strapped to a tabletop, making it impossible for her to do so fully. Her body felt heavy and ached. The Hyuga heiress tried to force chakra to her eyes, thinking, Byakugan, but as soon as she did, seals and symbols started to light up all around her, causing her chakra to fade to nothing. "I am within the family vault." As she tried to look around the room with her normal vision, she thought to herself. While her Byakugan was in operation, she had only caught a fleeting glimpse of the room, but she was able to identify the space where she was being held captive. The young woman understood that releasing herself from her bonds would be the first step in her plan, and devising an escape strategy would be the second. As she recovered her strength, Hinata waited. She thought it strange that no one had bothered to come in and see how she was doing, but she somehow thought it should be a blessing. She had been undressed and wearing a thin nightgown of some kind when she lay there and started to feel her body. She activated her Byakugan again after her chakra had returned, this time in a tiny spurt that gave her a brief glimpse of the room, similar to a bat sonar. She repeatedly used tiny amounts of chakra to avoid reactivating the runes and seals. With every flash, she gained more information, and she started to see more aspects of the room. She could see chakra strings everywhere, and with every flash she realized how precarious her situation was. Since each string was connected to an explosive tag, she would undoubtedly be killed or cause a commotion if she managed to break free from her restraints. Therefore, whatever plan she had to have would have to be one that would enable her to get away without getting blown up. With her eyes closed, she lay there staring at the room while calming her breathing and lowering her heart rate. She lay there taking in all the pictures she had seen inside the room, even though the silence was oppressive. It was about 3 meters across and completely empty except for her and the table. Her head was pointing in the direction of a door, but she couldn't tell beyond that because her Byakugan could only reach the dark room. Tsunade had spent hours waiting for an opportunity to enter the Hyuga complex, and she had waited for darkness to descend over Konoha. She felt compelled to do this herself, even though she was now the Hokage and the Anbu were supposed to handle such strategies. She had to find out what Hizashi had done and how it related to Hinata and Naruto. Despite her brief acquaintance with Naruto, the elderly Hokage had grown to love him like a grandmother and didn't want to see him the way he did when Isaribi staged her death. The Hyugas were the only family Naruto had left in this world, aside from herself and Jiraiya, and she was going to make sure he could maintain it. The fifth Hokage entered the compound after performing a jutsu that tenfold enhanced all of her senses, with the exception of hearing. Silent as a leaf on a blade of grass, the seasoned Kunoichi moved through the compound. As she watched two sentries enter what should have been the main branch house, laughing and chatting to each other, her heart pounded fiercely in her chest. God forbid she was growing too old for this, so she hurried inside as the door was about to close. Tsunade was aware that she was totally vulnerable in this hallway. The elderly Hokage's genjutsu changed her form during a brief series of signs, making her resemble a Hyuga servant girl rather than the woman she had been in her 20s. As long as she avoided raising suspicions, it would be more than sufficient to let her slip past the Byakugan, even though there would be no chance that it would fool it. With little success, the fictitious Hyuga servant started to wander freely around the compound in search of any sign of Hiyashi or Hyoma. Before she had ventured far into the main compound's underbelly, she was on the verge of giving up on the possibility that her intuition was incorrect. The false Hyuga crept up to the hard wooden door, where she could hear Hizashi's voice. Her footsteps were as soft as cotton on rabbit fur and as light as the air she was walking through. Her heart rate slowed and her breathing almost stopped. She enhanced her hearing by using her chakra, and the sound she heard almost made her smash the door. Her ear echoed with the loud cracking sound of knuckles on flesh. He yelled at his twin, "Tell me what the jutsu is." The sound of spitting could be heard. "I won't tell you anything, Hizashi. I tried everything to make you see that the separation between us was your doing, and I will not allow you to use my daughter's life in your sick and twisted ideals of power and control," Hiyashi responded. "Your position in the family should have been mine, Hiyashi. Since nature refused to give me what I deserve, I will take it with my own hand. Now tell me the secret of the sealing jutsu. My son shall inherit what belongs to him when I'm gone, and that Biju will be my legacy." Hizashi yelled at his twin. "What legacy is that, Hizashi?" "Huh, overthrowing your brother for power. Is that it?" replied Hiyashi. "Yes," Hizashi said. "Then you are truly lost, brother, and with all I can, I will make sure that the secret of the sealing jutsu goes to the grave with me," Hiyashi replied. Hizashi cruelly questioned, "Are you willing to sacrifice your unborn child and wife?" When Hinata heard the heavy steel door groan as it opened wide, her heart began to race in her chest. After giving this some thought, the Hyuga heiress decided that the only thing he could do was to wait and see what would happen to her in the room when someone walked in. This initial visitor appeared to be monitoring her vitals and even gave her an intravenous stab wound so she could receive her nutrients. She discovered that her Byakugan would operate normally while she was receiving care, indicating that the barriers keeping her in place had been overcome. In addition, she found that the defenses would only be lowered when the branch family's cursed mark was worn. Hinata grinned to herself as the vault door closed because she had cut the straps holding her down with her chakra and had a plan to get out. She merely hoped that her cousin Neji would be the next person to enter the vault.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.